Chapter 889. Unlike most other intelligent races, the night elves were nocturnal creatures. Although the high elves, who shared the same bloodline as them, also had the mystical talent of night vision, the night elves also had the shadow evasion that the high elves did not have. At night, as long as they remained still, the power of the moon god would make them disappear from the sight of mortals. Of course, this was only a form of visual deception. This did not prevent the night elves from showing the world how much the moon god doted on them. Of the 500 temple guards, 350 were night elf archers, while 150 were the night elves' specialty, huntresses. These huntresses rode on night saber that was pure black and could also hide in the shadows and darkness. They held a special weapon that was as large as a plate and had 3 sharp edges. This mystical special weapon had the effect of rebounding enemies nearby when it hit them. Tyrant herself rode on a huge saber-toothed tiger with black stripes on it. With a whistle, this squadron of elite guards of the moon god Hall left the summit of Mount Hyjal at high speed. Soon, they left the main road. At this time, the night elves' racial talent was on full display. In the complex terrain of the mountain, be it the elven archers on foot or the huntresses riding on night saber, they all moved as if they were flying. The rugged terrain could not stop them at all. Mount Hyjal was huge. Due to the terrain, they had to first enter Fellwood Forest to the west, then head south to Grey Valley to reach the east of Malfurion's Grey Valley. Even with their outstanding ability to pass through the mountains, they could not ignore the demons that appeared in the forest along the way. They cleared out the demons as they advanced, and it took them a full 13 days. Then, they received a grievous news. The demigod Cenarius had been killed by the Fell Orcs' leader, Grom Hellscream. This news made Tyrant and the temple guards furious, pained, and helpless. They had just heard Medivh say that the night elves should have allied with the human alliance and the orc tribes, and now their demigod had been killed. This was a resounding slap to the face. High Priest, what do we do? Shouldn't we form an army and deal with the beastmen first? Tyrant's trusted aide, Melind, was furious. Tyrant shook her head. No. According to the Sentinel's report, the wounds on Cenarius' body were filled with a demonic aura. This should be a demon scheme. We can't simply blame it on the beastmen. Have you forgotten about Queen Azhara? Queen Azhara was the earliest ruler of the elves. Her royal power could be traced back to the ancient times 10,000 years ago. It was because of the queen's fall that she colluded with the enemy and attracted the Burning Legion, which officially started the ancient war over the Well of Eternity. Demons, Burning Legion, this was the eternal pain of the night elves. The demigod Cenarius didn't leave us forever. A demigod's life form is different from ours. He'll return one day. Tyrant consoled her subordinates, but she started to hate the orcs from the bottom of her heart, labeling them as untrustworthy. It was not an easy task to wake Malfurion, who was exploring the Emerald Dream. It was impossible to wake him up just by pouring water on him. Tyrant needed Cenarius' horn, but when she arrived near Cenarius' body, she found it surrounded by a group of satyrs. After a battle, Tyrant snatched the horn back and went to Malfurion's hiding place, using the horn to wake him up. After sleeping in the Emerald Dream for 1,000 years, Malfurion had given his body to the earth, sharing his fate with the earth and breathing with the forest. In the end, Malfurion was awakened from the deepest dream by the familiar voice. The moment he opened his eyes and saw the beautiful face that he had loved for 10,000 years, he could not help but feel a pang in his heart. If not for the accident that had occurred in that battle 10,000 years ago, perhaps he and Tyrant would have fallen in love with each other. Here, he wanted to express the love in his heart, but he had no choice but to suppress his emotions. There were many temple guards watching from the side. He knew that Tyrant did not like to show her feelings in front of outsiders. Before they knew it, the sun had risen. A glaring yet comforting heat suddenly appeared in front of them. This reddish heat warmed Malfurion's body inside and out, reminding him of his childhood. Back then, he had been constantly learning to grow in the world. Together with his brother Illidan, unknowingly, they had fallen in love with the same person. Unfortunately, that was a distant memory. Malfurion sat up, lowered his head, and said in a low voice, "Wake me up. Is there an emergency?" Tyrande was relieved that Malfurion was not overly agitated. She replied in a delicate and elegant voice with a hint of divinity, "The Burning Legion has arrived again." With Tyrande's brief explanation, Malfurion understood what had happened and his responsibilities. "Then we need to wake up more druids. Unfortunately, they are sleeping in the underground caves." Just as Tyrande was about to wake up more druids with Malfurion as planned, there was a sudden commotion outside. "Enemy?" Tyrande and Malfurion gripped their weapons at almost the same time. At this time, Melon came in. "There's a very powerful human mage outside who wants to see Lord Whisperwind. He claims to be the commander of the alliance from the eastern kingdoms on the other side of the sea, Duke Marcus." "He's alone?" Malfurion was a little surprised. "Yes, perhaps he has absolute confidence in his own strength." After a pause, Melon emphasized, he doesn't have it. There's a family crest on his chest that's similar to Ronin's, but even more exquisite." Tyrande felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at Malfurion and said, "Let him in." Duque walked in with light footsteps. The Night Elves were a very important part of the alliance. Although every kingdom in the alliance had their own problems, the Night Elves' problem was more important. After dealing with Grom Hellscream, Duque flew towards the place where Malfurion had woken up in his memory. However, he didn't expect that with Ronin at the front line and Medivh informing him, the first thing he saw the most beautiful Night Elf Tyrande would be her nocking an arrow and pointing it at him. She questioned him sternly, "You're a Night Elf?" "Who?" Chapter 890. Duque was dumbfounded. Even if he was brave, even if he was used to big scenes, he was completely baffled by Tyrande's sudden hostility. He was certain that his identity as the Alliance's commander had been reported. From the moment he stepped into this area, Tyrande and Malfurion had not made any hostile moves. It was only when Tyrande saw his appearance that she suddenly felt enmity towards him. This meant that he was the one to blame. Moreover, Tyrande's hostility caused a chain reaction. Malfurion and Tyrande's personal guards around him immediately started fighting each other with their swords. Being pointed at by an archdruid wielding a nature magic staff and hundreds of arrows, Duque could not remain calm. Duque believed in Brother Spring's revival. But that depended on who he was facing. In the face of the Beastmen, before Sal started to become a shaman like in history, even if Duque was hacked to death 100 times, he would still dare to shout, "I'll resurrect on the spot for you to see." But Duque was afraid of two things. First, he was afraid of demons. If he died, even his soul would be enslaved or burned for 1,000 years. Second, he was afraid of real scammers. If Malfurion's soul was released from purgatory and returned to nature, it would be a tragedy for Duque, who would never be able to see his sister's grave. Almost subconsciously, Duque raised his hands, sweat dripping from his hair. He spoke in perfect Elvish, "Wait, is your excellency mistaken about something?" "There's no mistake. It's you." Tyrande's voluptuous breasts were heaving up and down, as if they were going to break the laces holding the armor together at any moment. Of course, Duque was not in the mood to appreciate such a beautiful scene. Malfurion spoke up, "Tyrande, you must be mistaken. It can't be him." Duque hurriedly went with the flow, "I swear, this is the first time I've seen the two of you. If the Alliance has offended the Night Elves in any way, I'll apologize on their behalf. There was no reason for there to be a conflict. Even if there was, it was the Alliance's problem. If we have to take the blame, let's take the blame together." In Duque's mind, two cauldrons had already appeared. One was a big cauldron that could fit hundreds of people in a cafeteria. You would need to use a paddle to stir it. Yes, this was the Alliance's cauldron. There was nothing wrong with it. The other was a small cauldron that was used by children to play house. It was smaller than a palm. Yes, this was Duque's cauldron. No matter how big the problem was, the entire Alliance would shoulder it. What virtue and ability do I have to bear this kind of inexplicable blame for the Alliance? Duque the scapegoat had already made up his mind. If there was anything, he would just refuse to confess even if he beat him to death. On this side, Duque froze. On the other side, Tyrande looked like a wronged wife. her lips were trembling, and her body was trembling. It can't be him. Humans don't have an eternal lifespan. At most, he is his descendant. Malfurion, who had already put down his staff, kept trying to persuade her. Moreover, as the chosen of Elun, can't you sense that this is really the first time he has seen you? On the other side, Duque, who had raised his hand in surrender, gave Malfurion a thumbs up in his heart. I'm really innocent. This is my first time seeing Tyrant. Well, eternal lifespan is another matter. Tyrant pursed her lips and put down the bow in her hand, a little dejectedly. I'm sorry. I must have made a mistake. You can't be him. He is from 10,000 years ago. I am deeply sorry for the offense just now. Moreover, even if you are him, he is a benefactor to me, to the entire Night Elven race, and even to the entire world. Duque's balls were hurting. What the hell is this? Regardless of whether I'm your enemy or not, is this how you treat your benefactor? For a moment, Duque almost wanted to curse. Unfortunately, the next moment, Duque's mind was in a mess. Wait, 10,000 years ago? Isn't that something that happened in the ancient war? As a transmigrator who was familiar with the original history, Duque knew about the future. Although this future had been messed up by him, there were still many things that Duque still knew. If one were to talk about the ancient war that happened 10,000 years ago, then one had to mention a divine drama in the original history of transmigration. In the near future, Krasus, the Orc Brock, and the others, due to an accident, transmigrated back to the ancient times 10,000 years ago and were forced to participate in the incomparably famous ancient war around the Well of Eternity. It was in that battle that because of the heroic performance of the Orc hero Brock, one of the bosses of the Burning Legion, Cultivation, set his eyes on the Orcs. That was how Cultivation found the Orcs in Draenor. Under the premise that there was a magic circle in Azeroth to expel the big bosses of the Burning Legion, Cultivation used the Orcs who could avoid the magic circle to invade the world of Azeroth. The incident this time was more like a huge closed loop. Because the people of the present messed around and changed the history of the past, then the history of the past turned around and affected the present. If that was the case, the current situation could be explained clearly. The biggest possibility was that the future Duque had somehow participated in this divine drama of transmigration and went back to 10,000 years ago. Then, under the premise of ensuring that the Burning Legion would still be defeated and scram, he did something that caused Tyrant's wrath. This caused Tyrant, who saw the present Duque for the first time in 15 years at the Dark Portal, to be extremely sensitive and excited. Alright. Since he was acting cool, he had to act till the end even if he cried and knelt. In that case, would he have to pay for the sins that he had done in the future? If Duque was a true saint, perhaps Duque would admit to it now. But who was Duque? That cheap university animal down to his bones. Never heard of him? Confess and you'll be imprisoned forever. Resist and you'll go home for the new year. Confess what? I haven't done anything yet. I won't confess even if I'm beaten to death. Not only did he not confess, Duque even used Alonso's Fail's moral integrity. His face was filled with a peaceful light. This time, Malfurion and the other guards were all relieved. A filthy demon would not have such holy power. However, Tyrant was even more certain that Duque had a mysterious connection with the hymn in the memories. All of this had been suppressed. However, looking at Tyrant's flushed face, Malfurion felt his heart throb again. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to recognize that this was caused by faint envy and jealousy. Because he knew that this beautiful elf before him had always been the one he loved deeply. But because of that incident, she had never truly accepted his love for the next 10,000 years. Chapter 891. As Tyrant's assistant, Melon had always been the most loyal to her boss. But at this moment, she was also dumbfounded. If it were translated into Duze's words, her current feeling would be, F***CK. What a load of information. Was the circle of nobles really messed up for 10,000 years? Wasn't that so? In the thousands of years before the War of the Ancients, outsiders believed that Tyrant would definitely choose one of the Stormrage brothers. who knew that after the War of the Ancients, whether it was Tyrant or the Stormrage brothers, that matter was taboo and refused to talk about it. After that, Tyrant started to distance herself from the two brothers. After all, the two of them didn't need to report to enter the Moon Maiden Temple. In any case, Melon's expression was written all over her face. I'm also helpless. However, there seemed to be new developments in this love triangle that had been going on for 10,000 years. Could it be that the one rumored to have ruined their relationship was the ancestor of this seemingly powerful alliance commander? Night elves were a very closed-off society. Although there were more than 1 million night elves, after 10,000 years, what kind of gossip hadn't spread? It wasn't just Melon. Even the seemingly loyal temple guards secretly pricked up their ears. Their gossipy souls were raging. Tyrant's almond-shaped eyes swept the surroundings. Immediately, every archer and huntress lowered their gazes, not daring to meet her eyes. Tyrant bowed deeply. My apologies, Sir Marcus. Because of a misunderstanding, you were startled. As the leader of the Night Elves, I was lacking in manners. If you think you need any compensation, feel free to mention it. Leaning over was the most alluring angle for a woman. Due to gravity, the allure would be magnified infinitely. Fortunately, Duke had seen a lot of Mount Hyjal archery. After all, the 3 Windrunner sisters were female rangers, and 2.5 of them were already in their stomachs. At least he had developed some immunity, or else the old Duke would not have dared to look over. At this moment, the gentlemanly Duque displayed his acting skills. He smiled confidently and said, Lord Yufeng's words are too heavy. Since it's a misunderstanding, there's no need to offend him. With the Burning Legion before us, shouldn't we put aside our differences and work together? That's why I'm here. Duque's generosity made many night elves secretly heave a sigh of relief. Duque's next words raised his image infinitely. If there is any compensation that must be made, I hope that you can forgive the tribe for accidentally killing the demigod Cenarius. After all, it was a demon's plot. As soon as he said that, the hearts of every night elf present seemed to be grabbed by 2 invisible hands and torn into 2. Even if Tyrant had said that Cenarius was not truly dead. But when the enemy was right in front of them, the Beastmen race had killed one of their powerhouses. It would be strange if they weren't angry. Many elves were so excited that they almost raised their weapons again. Tyrant stretched out her hand to stop her subordinates from moving. Tyrant raised her head and lifted her delicate chin slightly. Her eyes were filled with a complicated light. I've seen your student, Ronin. If his description is correct, the human-dominated alliance and beast-dominated tribe were mortal enemies before this, right? That's right. Duque admitted frankly. Ever since the Dark Portal opened 15 years ago, the tribe invaded the southernmost eastern kingdom, Stormwind, which is also my homeland. The alliance and the tribe have never truly reconciled. Under the brutal Beastmen's campaign of burning villages and massacring cities, no less than 5 million human compatriots had died at the hands of the Beastmen. It's not an exaggeration to say that the alliance and the tribe have a blood feud. Then you, Duke, changed the topic. In fact, from the past until now, there have been 4 great chiefs in the tribe. The first 3, Blackhand, Orgrim, and Nizul, all died in front of me. Even if I wasn't the mastermind, they all died because of me. If not for the solemn atmosphere, some of the night elf beauties might have burst out laughing. This scene was too strange and out of place. A leader of the alliance who killed 3 chiefs and had a blood feud with them was actually pleading for the enemy? However, Tyrant and Malfurion couldn't help but puff out their chests and suck in their stomachs in awe. They were waiting for Duque's answer. It might sound contradictory, doesn't it? But be it the alliance or the tribe, no matter which side wins in the end, it's just a change in the ruling race of planet Azeroth. But if the Burning Legion wins, then planet Azeroth will be completely destroyed. Duque's words were sonorous and resolute. This was the relationship between a small contradiction and the biggest contradiction. In the face of a planet's survival, the deaths of millions of people in the past 15 years were just a small contradiction not worth mentioning. What was the big picture? This was the big picture. Duque's words made Tyrant feel ashamed. Just 2 weeks ago, She had been delusional enough to think that she could fight against the Burning Legion led by the Archerons alone. Compared to Duque's resolution to join forces with his mortal enemy for the big picture, her previous thoughts were so insignificant. At this moment, Malfurion placed a hand on the triple-carved pauldrons on Tyron's left shoulder and said in a low voice, "Even humans have such resolution. We night elves can't be too petty. Moreover, after the last battle, we've spent 9,000 years and still haven't completely healed the damage to the earth." The damage to the earth. This was the greatest pain in the hearts of the night elves who mainly believed in the teachings of the druids. Tyrande nodded hard and strode towards Duque with her head held high. She extended her hand. "I heard that you humans treat handshakes as a symbol of friendship and unity. In that case, I think that in this huge crisis, we night elves, the Alliance, and even the tribe should work together." Duque shook Tyrande's hand firmly. This was a historic handshake. In the eyes of future historians, this was also a handshake that signaled the night elves joining the Alliance. With the foundation set, everything else was easy to discuss. "Yes, I haven't asked. Marcus, why are you here this time? Don't be so formal. Call me Duque, I'll get used to it." My surname is actually Du, not Ma." Then, Duque roughly explained the situation of the Burning Legion that he knew, and finally pointed out his goal. "You're saying that the Death Knight Arthas, the strongest lackey of the Calamity army who killed his father, destroyed 4 kingdoms, and half of Lordaeron, came to Kalimdor alone." Chapter 892. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Now that he had matured, Duque understood better what was needed for diplomacy between countries and factions. Before he transmigrated, Premier Zhou had proposed a very good idea, seeking common ground while reserving differences. With this principle in mind, with the same enemy and goals that could be reconciled, the Night Elves joining the Alliance was a matter of course. Now that Duque had mentioned killing Arthas, Tyrande and Malfurion didn't feel anything at first. However, when Duque said that we have evidence that Arthas is using the skull of Ghoul Dan, one of the culprits of the first and second Dark Portal, to pollute and destroy Fellwood Forest, the 2 night elves couldn't sit still anymore. No one was more worried about the situation in the forest than the night elves. On their way here, Tyrande had already ordered her sentries to kill many satyrs, but the demons seemed endless. If not for the imminent invasion of the Burning Legion, Tyrande would have definitely turned back to Mount Hyjal and sent her troops to wipe out the entire Fellwood Forest. Now, with Duque's spoiler, they finally understood the root of the problem. Tyrande gritted her teeth, looking like she wanted the white tiger she was riding on to tear Arthas apart. Malfurion was even more unbelievable. The surging power of nature from his body made his long hair and beard float in midair. If his hair and beard were golden, he would be even more golden-haired than the Lion King. After days of killing demons, the guards of the Temple of Light weren't unharmed. Thinking of their sisters who had been sacrificed, Melanie and the other elves were furious. "Do you know where Arthas is?" Tyrande asked. Duque shook his head. "As the main leader of the Calamity army, we noticed Arthas as soon as he disappeared from the front lines of the Eastern Kingdom. Unfortunately, I was already in the Kalimdor continent at the time and couldn't track him further. We could only rely on the Radiant Moon Archmages from the Alliance who were nearby to sense that Arthas had come to Fellwood through spatial fluctuations." Duque was just bullshitting. He was relying on his knowledge of the plot and guessing. What if Arthas didn't appear? In any case, every region covered tens of thousands of square kilometers. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't find such a large place. What if he found it? That would be fun. If there was another Lich King who could defeat Arthas, they wouldn't have to attack the Ice Crown Fortress anymore. How convenient. Then we also... Tyrande was about to say that the Night Elves also had helpers, but she suddenly realized that she still had important matters to attend to. She could only change her words. "I left Mount Hyjal this time to awaken the druids who were sleeping in Grey Valley and other places. In the upcoming Holy War on Mount Hyjal, they are indispensable combat power." So Duque smiled in understanding. It's okay. Our goals are not in conflict. We're only going to send a few powerhouses into Fellwood Forest to try our luck. With that, Duque handed over a list of names. If it wasn't for the signs of the Burning Legion's arrival, the isolated Night Elves wouldn't have liked outsiders to enter. Since they had a common enemy in the Burning Legion, it wouldn't be a big deal to let a few humans and elves enter Fellwood Forest, excluding the prominent backgrounds of the people on the list. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief. Then it shouldn't be a problem. With just a few of you, aren't you worried that you won't be able to deal with that cruel villain Arthas? Duque's eyes flashed. You should be worried that he won't meet us. The confidence in his words made Tyrant and the other elves' hearts skip a beat, but then they were overjoyed. No matter what, a strong ally was always more reliable than a useless teammate. In fact, Duque was also secretly laughing in his heart. If the flow of fate hadn't collapsed, then the famous egg, Illidan's Stormrage, would be making his appearance. In Azeroth, there were many famous heroes who had fallen into depravity that made the players sigh. Perhaps they all came from a good background, or they could have been heroes or saviors, but due to fate, they fell into the dark side. The former paladin Prince Arthas was the same. The original Prince Kael, that was the same. Illidan, who was about to appear next, gave Duque a similar feeling. But unlike the previous idiots and idiots, Illidan wasn't an absolutely positive character from the start. Illidan was Malfurion Stormrage's twin brother. Like his older brother, the two brothers grew up together with Priestess Tyrant Whisperwind thousands of years before the War of the Ancients. Unlike his older brother, Malfurion, Illidan had no patience for learning the teachings of the Druids even though both brothers had studied under the demigod Cenarius. Cenarius felt that Illidan's current condition wasn't suitable for him to directly learn the mysteries of nature, so he didn't teach him directly. Instead, he suggested that Illidan learn from Malfurion. This decision made Illidan feel defeated and humiliated. For the first time, he felt pressure from his older brother. In the end, Illidan decided to focus on arcane magic, which was the mainstream of the Night Elves at the time, and achieved very good results. He had amber eyes, which were rare among the Night Elves before they split. This was usually considered a good omen for his future, even though Illidan didn't show any extraordinary abilities at the time. But what he didn't know was that this was a prophecy from millions of years ago, an unimaginable ancient era. Illidan became addicted to arcane magic and gradually learned more advanced spells. But to his disappointment, the Night Elves' mage army, the Moon Guards, didn't accept him because he had learned high-level magic. However, Illidan still decided to become the kind of hero that his people hoped for in order to win the heart of the beautiful tyrant that the two brothers fell in love with. His chance had come. It was the War of the Ancients that could destroy all of Azeroth 10,000 years ago. The Burning Legion corrupted the powerful Sarvis and seduced the High Elf Queen Azhara. The Queen opened a huge portal to welcome the arrival of the demon army, and the situation in Azeroth was desperate. At this time, Illidan played a beautiful trick and pretended to obey the demon king Sargeras. Then, together with his brother, he analyzed the High Elves' magic and reversed it. All the demons in Azeroth were thrown back into the twisting nether by the suction produced by the portal, and its collapse caused the Well of Eternity to explode. He could have become a hero, but he stubbornly built a second Well of Eternity, attacked a group of Night Elves, and killed a Night Elf noble who had made outstanding contributions. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Chapter 893. If it was a human, even if you were young, anyone would die after a few decades of life imprisonment. But Illidan was a Night Elf, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment after receiving the blessing of eternal life. For the next 10,000 years, Illidan's Stormrage lived alone in a very deep underground prison and was personally guarded by the Watcher Maev Shadowsong. Anyone who sat in prison for a long time would be full of resentment, not to mention that it was 10,000 years. It was a miracle that he did not become a lunatic. Anyway, Duque did not understand why the original tyrant would think that a few thousand years of living together could make up for the resentment of 10,000 years of imprisonment and was actually stupid enough to let Illidan out. Since Duque could not change the fact that Illidan had been imprisoned for 10,000 years and his mentality was extremely twisted, Then Duque did not plan to stop this from happening. After all, Illidan's so-called fall had little to do with the alliance. Moreover, most of Illidan's actions were chasing after the Scourge army and then the Burning Legion. He seemed to have even dug up the ancestral graves of the Drenii, but what did this have to do with the current alliance? Moreover, since ancient times, the ones who killed the most people in history were traitors. Illidan was very active in killing the Burning Legion. He was even more aggressive than the Vanguard. Didn't they see that in the end, due to the trend of the times, even the Alliance accepted warlocks who used demonic powers, death knights, and demon hunters? If Duke killed Illidan before he could master his demonic powers and become a demon hunter, Tyrande and Malfurion would not be able to do anything about it. The loss of a demon hunter in the future would be enough to make Duke's head hurt. Moreover, if Illidan did not become dark, how would Duque have the chance to go to the Black Temple to farm twin blades of Azeroth? Thinking back to when the pure and innocent Duque was the leader, he had a lucky hand. This, twin blades of Azeroth, commonly known as the egg knife, was so common that all thieves and warriors in the team had one. In the end, no one wanted it, and even a mage like him had one. Afterwards, Duque would go to Ironforge, the place with the most players. Whenever he saw a poor thief, he would go up to them and place the godly weapon in the trade window. The titanium alloy dog eyes of those poor black thieves of dazzling flower. Bah! Bitch! You're a mage, yet you're trying to steal a thief's equipment. He could still remember the scolding in the local channel, and then after Duque typed, the whole world went dead silent. That's how popular my team is. Even mages could pick up an egg blade to play with. If you want an egg cleaver and are skilled enough, PM me. In the next instant, Duque's private chat was flooded with messages. Under the temptation of the divine artifact, even the main thieves of the Deadwater Guild, the archenemy of the Duque Guild, came to lick their boots. That was awesome. You've gone off topic. In any case, Duque had basically achieved his goal of coming here this time, which was to make himself known. Then, Tyrande asked, I wonder how many troops the Alliance can send to resist the Burning Legion? Duque raised his hands and put up 10 fingers. I heard that the mountain path up Mount Hyjal is narrow, so I only plan to send 50,000 mechanized mountain divisions to help defend the mountain. Also, 80,000 troops will cut off the Archeron's retreat after they enter Mount Hyjal to prevent more demons from the Burning Legion from coming up the mountain. Tyrande nodded. She was very satisfied with this number. Although she didn't understand what mechanized mountain divisions were, 130,000 troops was exactly what the Night Elves wanted. An immortal race was most likely not a race with strong fertility. The Night Elves did have millions of people, but they were spread across many regions. From the Feathermoon Fortress on Sodder Island in the southwest of the continent, to the vast Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest, Mount Hyjal, and Teldrassil Island across the sea. Even though the Night Elves were said to be all soldiers, the number of elites that could actually gather on Mount Hyjal was only about 300,000. After all, it was the famous Burning Legion. It would be great if the Alliance and the Horde could share the losses. Then, Duque, Ilun told me that the Burning Legion's vanguard will land in Azhara in about a week. I hope to see the Alliance's army then. Duque bowed. In fact, our troops have already started to land in Azhara. We will be the first and second line of defense to stop the Burning Legion. Duque's words surprised Tyrande, but she was immediately delighted. She had been a little worried that she wouldn't be able to wake up all the sleeping druids before the Burning Legion arrived. Now that the Alliance was so loyal to them, this was definitely a huge advantage for the Night Elves. Tyrande bowed deeply this time. Then I will thank the Alliance on behalf of the people of this world. After meeting Tyrande, Duque directly teleported to the beach in the Azhara region. There was naturally someone there to set up a teleportation circle for Duque. Coming out of the teleportation circle, Duque couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, the world barrier of this world was still very strong against demons. Most demons that were Lord level or above could not teleport from one corner of Azeroth to another. Otherwise, the Alliance and the Horde would be done for. Just wait for death. Looking west from the broken beach of Azhara, Storm Bay was an extremely busy scene. From afar, If you said that it was the famous Normandy landing in World War II on Earth, Duque would even believe it. The effect of Duque's early arrival in Azeroth and the explosion of black technology was fully displayed at this moment. There were countless giant steel warships. From afar, countless chimneys were emitting black smoke. Up close, it was easy to see that almost every warship was a giant steel beast made from thick iron sheets and large rivets the size of a fist. From the huge black holes at the back of the ships, strange rectangular boats were pulled out and quickly rushed onto the beach. One after another, heavy steam tanks followed the road that the mages had reinforced with sand to stone, and drove onto the beach, entering the main road from Azhara to Grey Valley. In the ruins of Idraz near the main road, small teams of Alliance professionals could be seen everywhere. With the help of the beginner Dalajan mages, they cleared out the vengeful spirits in the ruins, the surrounding Naga, and all kinds of messy low-level demons, paving the way for the army to advance. Suddenly, a voice came. "Yo, Duque, I thought you were obsessed with the Night Elf High Priest and refused to come back." Duque bared his teeth. There weren't many people who could mock him so unscrupulously. It was a pity that Sylvanas was one of the few who could do so. Chapter 894. Queen Sylvanas today was beautiful. Now that she was a queen, she could no longer wear the outfit of her former ranger general. Of course, the general equipment was not changed, but the originally low-key green jungle equipment was all replaced with the gorgeous gold jewelry of the High Elves' aristocratic style. At first glance, Duque thought he was looking at the supermodels in Victoria's Secret before he transmigrated. Looking at the two long legs as well as the exposed hemispheres and slender waist, please forgive the shameless Duke for swallowing his saliva. Of course, if one thought that the shiny silver crescent longbow in Queen Sylvanas' hand was some kind of decoration or a sex toy, it would be a big mistake. Taking a demon's head from 1,000 meters away was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Using a scimitar at close range to kill enemies was like chopping melons and vegetables. Sometimes, one's aura rose along with one's status and identity. She had not been a queen for long, but her heroic and noble aura made people feel a sense of majesty from a few meters away. If Duque was not a Grand Duke and the commander of the Alliance, he would not be able to suppress this fierce girl. Since they had kissed and hugged each other, Duke naturally wouldn't mind going up and getting intimate with the woman in his pot. If there wasn't another person around. Duque was a little annoyed. Because Jaina was there too. Although she was still wearing the same battle mage equipment, the changes were still obvious. First was the shiny silver crown. Duque was not surprised that the crown of Quell, Tiras would eventually fall on Jaina's head. After all, she was the legitimate heir of Dellen's line. The key was that Jaina wore lipstick and light makeup today. In the past, in order to weaken her image as a princess and strengthen her identity as a mage, Jaina would wear a mage's attire all day and never wear any makeup. Of course, she was naturally beautiful and did not need makeup. But with makeup, her lethality was more than doubled. Before Du transmigrated, Japanese makeup technique was one of the 4 great evil techniques in Asia, along with Thai sex change, Korean plastic surgery, and Chinese Photoshop. Jaina didn't hesitate to use one of the 4 great evil arts today. Duke would rather not know why. Jaina was the first to step forward and perform a ladylike bow from a suitable distance. Of course, wearing a mage robe wasn't bad either. After all, she was wearing the same silver breastplate as always. Duque, thank you for taking over the negotiations with the Night Elves when I was depressed. Now I've sorted out my feelings. I didn't believe in fate before. There were some things that I thought would never come to me, and I had already given up on fighting for them. But since it's the will of the goddess of destiny, I have to fight for it no matter what. You're welcome. Duque tried to avoid the topic. Taking a deep breath, Jaina continued, however, I have to avenge my father and second brother. Before that, I will not hold a formal enthronement ceremony. If I'm lucky enough to kill Archimonde, then I hope that you, Duque, will do me the honor of attending my enthronement ceremony. At this point, Jaina glanced at Sylvanas, intentionally or unintentionally, I hope that you can give me the same opportunity as His Majesty Menethil and His Majesty Windrunner. On the surface, Jaina was talking about the royal family of Quell, Tiras, but in reality, her attitude made Duque's teeth hurt. Beside him, Queen Sylvanas smiled without saying a word, which made Duque a little scared. Fortunately, the arrival of Turalian and the others diluted the awkwardness. Looking at the lineup, Duque couldn't help but smile. Turalian with Quell, Zaram, Mograine with Ashbringer, Bulang Bronzebeard, Sidon Dathrahan, Sylvanas, Lillis, Riadaline, Jaina, Ronan, Prince Kale, and 2 master astromancers. If he, Duque, and Tyrande were added, it would be an all-star team of 15. It was precisely because he was worried that the Burning Legion would cause trouble that Duque had mobilized almost all the Alliance's powerhouses that he could. On the Eastern Kingdom's side, there were only people like Magni, Cudrin, Abendis, and the injured Lothar. Queen Sylvanas glanced at the countless steel beasts on the beach and suddenly sighed. Sigh, if not for the fact that guns and cannons are ineffective against demons, I would have thought that bows and swords have already left the stage of history. Duque was a little embarrassed, and Bulang was a little naggy. Duque still said, different regions have different ways of fighting. Before the Burning Legion enters Mount Hyjal, we mainly focus on a war of attrition. My intelligence shows that Archimonde is constantly summoning demons. I have to remind you not to be afraid. Although Archimonde can summon demons infinitely in theory, Azeroth's protective spell formation is still in effect. So, the number of demon soldiers he can receive every day is limited. There were no idiots here. Jaina's eyes flashed. In other words, as long as we eliminate the demons faster, we can suppress the Burning Legion? Yes. As long as Archimonde starts to enter Mount Hyjal, he will be affected by the spell formation set up by the Night Elves and Dragons, and it will be almost impossible to summon new demons to Azeroth. In order to deal with him, we must first completely separate him from his subordinates. Duque made a cutting motion with his hand. Understood. The purpose of the Alliance army is to exhaust those low-level and mid-level demons. Bulang Bronzebeard understood immediately. Yes, the line of defense of Azeroth will be left to you dwarves, as well as a mixed team of Dalajan and Blood Elf mages. Duque raised his head. This line of defense will be handled by Bulang, Ronan, and Kale, Bulang and the other 2 nodded in unison. Duque then pointed to the east of Grey Valley. The Night Elves have already abandoned this place because they suffered heavy losses in the previous conflict with the Horde. Sylvanas, I'll leave this place to your rangers. Leave it to me. Queen Sylvanas proudly straightened her back. Duque emphasized, listen, at this stage the demons can't be completely killed. So my instruction to you is, preserve the land and lose the people, and lose both the people and the land. Preserve the people and lose the land, and the people and the land will be protected. Don't stubbornly resist. If the situation is not good, retreat according to the predetermined route. Understood. They answered together. The rest of you, follow me to Mount Hyjal to set up the line of defense. At this point, Duque paused, but before that, the few of you will first follow me to a place, in a huge underground cave in Grey Valley. As if guided by fate, Tyrande turned her head in an instant and found an ancient cellar. Even though the entrance had been concealed by nature magic, it was only to deceive outsiders. Tyrande immediately realized where she was, the place where Illidan was imprisoned. Chapter 895. How could Malfurion not know what Tyrande was thinking? He objected almost immediately, no. This is not suitable. Tyrande. But before he could finish, Tyrande interrupted him, we need a true powerhouse. Normal attacks can't hurt Archimonde at all. Malfurion's face turned green, but he couldn't find a reason to refuse. That's right. The one coming was the commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde. The vanguard of the demons. The super demon leader who had destroyed countless planets by himself. He wasn't naive enough to think that Archimonde, one of the 3 leaders of the Burning Legion, could be killed by sheer numbers. If it was possible, there wouldn't be the terrifying legend of Archimonde beating the world. But the Night Elves didn't have many powerhouses who had entered the realm of heroes, so they could all be killed with a single slap. Malfurion was suddenly a little envious of the alliance. Just looking at that Duke Marcus, although he didn't make a move and was even showing weakness, Malfurion and Tyrant could faintly feel that if he made a move, apart from the two of them, none of the Night Elves present would be able to survive. In ancient times, when the Night Elves and High Elves were still one family, super powerful mages like Duke who had the power to destroy an entire city were not uncommon. Savi's was like that, and so was Queen Azhara. But the strong wouldn't find weak teammates to help. From the list of people that Duke had voluntarily provided to kill Arthas, it was easy to deduce that the alliance definitely had many top powerhouses. Malfurion still wanted to object. Tyrant, have you forgotten? How did Illidan end up in prison? Besides, after 10,000 years of imprisonment, we still don't know how he is now. If Malfurion wasn't Illidan's big brother, he might even say something like, "You released another demon to deal with one demon." Of course, this was impossible. After all, it was Illidan who had made a huge mistake, and Malfurion had single-handedly protected him. But 10,000 years had passed, and perhaps the little bit of affection from back then had long been worn away by endless loneliness and torture, turning into hatred. Tyrant hesitated as well. However, any intelligent creature would be easily swayed by emotions. Even though they hadn't seen each other for 10,000 years, Tyrant still made up her mind to release Illidan when she thought of the three of them living in harmony 10,000 years ago. After all, blood was thicker than water. Under Tyrant's insistence, Malfurion had no intention of remonstrating. However, when she reached the cage, Tyrant received a firm rejection. The guard replied, "Illidan's storm rage is the most unforgivable of sinners. If Malfurion and you hadn't protected Illidan back then, he should have received the cruelest death sentence a long time ago." These guards were all die-hard fans of Warden Maiev Shadowsong. It just so happened that Maiev had temporarily left to provide support due to another prison being attacked by demons. Tyrant was furious. "I, the High Priest of the Moon Goddess, Tyrant Whisperwind, am the true leader of the Night Elves. I order you to open the prison and release Illidan's storm rage. Forgive me for not being able to comply." The leader of the guards replied. However, the words of one of the guards behind her completely ignited Tyrant's anger. This sentence was spoken in the ancient language of the High Elves. Of course, the words were even more vicious and bitter. Elegantly translated, this sentence was, "You still pretended to be so holy after coming back from the demons. Now, you finally can't help but want to take your lover back?" This was no longer a matter of being overwhelmed by anger. After Queen Azhara's group of High Elves fell and were cast into the deep sea, the Night Elves experienced two more upheavals before they formed the religious kingdom of Elune that was centered around nature. The first time was when the remnants of the High Elves led by Dathrima were exiled and renamed the High Elves. The second time was when the Druids, with Malfurion as the core, announced their neutrality and gave up their political rights. However, they formed the Cenarian Circle, an interracial organization that worshipped nature. Thus, Tyrant, who originally wouldn't start a massacre, gave the order, "Kill. Kill until blood flowed like a river. Kill until heads rolled." Finally, she even had her subordinates carve the reason for the massacre on the wall as an explanation to Maiev Shadowsong. In a sense, it was also to help Illidan, who was about to be released. Was there really nothing wrong with being imprisoned for 10,000 years by a guard who hated him? Who would believe that? When he opened the prison door and saw Illidan's storm rage, who was bare-chested and muscular but had his eyes covered, Malfurion still felt that something was wrong. His little brother was too calm. The saying that love begets hate, and hate begets love wasn't without reason. Only when one cared would there be emotional fluctuations. If a few of their own died, they might not be able to take it. But if 10,000 ants died in a faraway land, who would feel anything? The moment Malfurion saw Illidan, he felt that something was wrong. However, Tyrant, who he loved deeply, had advocated for Illidan, so he could only silently watch as Tyrant told him about the Burning Legion. The leader of the Burning Legion, Archimonde, is about to destroy Mount Hyjal, the World Tree, and devour the Well of Eternity. Illidan, our people need your strength to once again resist the Burning Legion. Tyrant spoke passionately, but Malfurion's heart sank. If Duque was here, he would definitely scoff. However, this couldn't be blamed on Tyrant. All priests were extremely devout idealists. This was the complete opposite of a materialist like Duque, who had been educated by the Celestial Empire. However, idealists had a very magical ability. They would believe in things that others wouldn't. For example, Tyrant actually believed that Illidan was still thinking about their 10,000 years of love and wasn't affected by the recent 10,000 years of suffering. That was why, even though Duque knew that Tyrant wanted to save Illidan, he definitely wouldn't get involved. Firstly, this was the internal affairs of the Night Elves. Secondly, he was afraid that if he saw Tyrant acting so emotionally, he wouldn't be able to help but slap her a few times. Tyrant, you can bathe in moonlight every night. Have you ever experienced the feeling of complete darkness? Tyrant's persuasion stopped abruptly. Tyrant, have you tried to contact Alun? You can't communicate with any living beings, and you can only spend a month in silence? But At this moment, Malfurion stepped forward. Illidan suddenly raised his hand and stopped his elder brother. He stated his condition. I can agree to participate in the battle against the Burning Legion, but not for the Night Elves. I will fight for you alone, Tyrant. Chapter 896. A Knight Who Protected the Princess. That sounded good, didn't it? Unfortunately, Tyrant was destined to be unable to return this feeling. In the world of love, she had already sentenced Illidan to death. Illidan, who had rebelled, could not become the partner of someone who believed in nature and the way of Alun. Biting her lower lip, Tyrant's breathing quickened. She knew that as long as she gave a hint, a powerful hero would become a fighting force for the Night Elves. Could she do it? Malfurion, who also adored her, was watching from the side. She could only remain silent. Silence was her answer. She hoped to have Illidan as a fighting force, but she did not want to make any promises on personal matters. Illidan smiled. He stretched his muscles and then walked to the room that stored his unique weapon not far away. He took out the famous Azanatha's dual blades from the future. There were two of these green crescent-shaped double-headed blades. Although their shapes were special, they were classified as one-handed swords. This set of legendary weapons originally belonged to the Burning Legion's Eridar Apocalypse Guard officer, Azanoth. Before the cataclysm of the Ancient War, Azanoth was killed by an egg. Illidan stole Azanatha's weapons. 10,000 years later, Illidan could use them even better than the old owner of the blades. His greatest characteristic was his insane attack speed. When he activated the special effect of his great sword, he was like a tornado. Even a thumb-thick piece of sashimi or an egg could be evenly sliced into hundreds of pieces in just a second. Not to mention the enemy. Holding a pair of dual blades of Azanoth was like automatically learning lying corpse swordsmanship. With a gust of wind, all the enemies were lying on the ground. Regardless of whether Malfurion thought it was cool or not, if Duque was here, Illidan's action of crossing the blades behind his back would be super cool. Alright, what do you want me to do? I heard that the Burning Legion's vanguard is using a magic weapon called Ghoul Dan's Skull to pollute the Fellwood Forest. Malfurion and I are going to awaken more sleeping druids. Can I trouble you to purify the Fellwood Forest first? No problem. And so, Illidan led more than 100 archers and huntresses to the Fellwood Forest. The air of freedom didn't taste all that good, because what was echoing in the air above Fellwood Forest was a scent that he was incomparably familiar with 10,000 years ago, the scent of demons. The night elves around him could not understand Illidan's thoughts. They were simply following Tyrant's orders and following Illidan. Too weak, Illidan muttered to himself. Sir, what are you talking about? I'm talking about me, but I'm also talking about you guys. The huntress leader's face immediately turned red, and she raised the spinning blade in her hand. I've been trained for 2,000 years, she babbled on, but Illidan wasn't listening. His thoughts had already returned to the ancient war 10,000 years ago. It was an era where demons danced wildly, and it was also an era where experts came forth in large numbers. The sky was filled with powerful dragons, but even the dragons that covered the sky were unable to resist the terrifying attack of the Burning Legion. As the ancient war gradually became more and more intense, the anger of the Burning Legion almost drove people to desperation. Even today, the new generation of night elves regarded the flying dragons as the most powerful existence, but they still continued to fall from the sky like dumplings. In that battle, Illidan desperately tried to stop the army that attacked Fort Raven. He constantly used mana burn, a terrifying skill that did not even let go of his allies. After burning all the mana in his body, those demons were just big targets. Illidan had always thought so. Compared to the efficiency of killing the enemy, the moon guards on his side were not worth mentioning after losing their mana and even their lives. Unfortunately, because of his extreme fighting style, he was removed from the position of leader of the mage army. This blow made him even angrier. In the end, Illidan also left the Night Elven army, but he embarked on a completely different path from his brother. He thought that arcane magic could not gain an advantage in war, so he turned to trying to understand and control the power of demons. For this, Illidan chose the most direct method, pretending to join the Burning Legion. Sargeras was very satisfied with this. He personally injected a great amount of power into Illidan through the portal, but this also made Illidan realize a despairing fact. The army attacking Azeroth was just a drop in the ocean. In the countless broken worlds of the twisting nether, there were more hungry demon armies than there were stars in the sky, and they were even more incalculable. What was more terrifying was that the demons could not be killed outside of the twisted nether. Unless their souls could be destroyed, their souls would return to the twisted nether, and soon they would reform into a new body. After learning this horrible truth, Illidan was even more adept at playing infernal affairs. 10,000 years of imprisonment had made Illidan extremely weak. An instinctive hunger kept tormenting him in his body. It was like the orcs who had been controlled by the demon blood of the Lord of the Abyss, Manoroth. The evil demon power had a powerful addiction that outsiders could not understand. His breathing became rapid, and his senses became blurred. However, one thing became clearer in his vision. It was a cluster of black light that the night elves around him could not detect. Only the existence that had received the power of demons could clearly see that light pillar. You guys split up into small teams and hunt the demons in the forest. Come back here at sunset. Illidan sent away the sentries who did not want to stay by his side. Just 10 seconds later, Illidan tilted his head to the left and said coldly, "Come out. My eyes are blind, but the demon fire in my eye sockets allows me to see everything I should see." That was one of the consequences of playing infernal affairs 10,000 years ago. The demon king, Sargeras, personally destroyed his eyes. After burning all the muscles in his eye sockets and even exposing part of his skull, what appeared in his eye sockets were two wisps of evil energy. The power of the same origin could not be hidden from each other. A pale-haired death knight wearing black skeleton-heavy armor appeared from behind the tree. The giant rune sword in his hand was emitting an unparalleled evil aura. It made Illidan subconsciously raise the twin blades of Azenith in his hand. "Who?" Illidan shouted. "Death Knight Arthas Menethil, the king of Lordaeron across the Endless Sea, the most loyal servant of the Lich King." Chapter 897. Illidan's muscles twitched. If he still had eyes, it would have been a squint. "Before I kill you, you better tell me why you're here." The air seemed to pass through Arthas's cold nostrils and escape to the outside world, but Illidan could sense the purity of the dark power in Arthas's body. "Do you know what is corroding the Fellwood Forest?" "The skull of Ghoul, Dan." Illidan's lips curled into a mocking smile. Arthas was caught off guard, but he quickly reacted. "You're right, but you're only half right." "What do you mean?" As if subconsciously, Illidan pointed the crescent blade in his right hand at the Death Knight's chest. It's the skull of Gul'Thin. But you can't imagine how powerful this divine artifact is. Illidan was silent. Arthas' voice was full of temptation. As long as you absorb the power inside, with your talent, it's not impossible for you to become a demigod. Suddenly, a mocking smile appeared on Illidan's face again. If it's so powerful, why don't you use it yourself? Arthas spread his hands. Because I'm no longer alive. The dark power I use is born from the Burning Legion's dark powers, but it's different. To be precise, I use the power of death. Do you really think I'm asking about this? Illidan was already in a fighting stance. Arthas could only explain. My master, the Lich King, will be happy to see you steal this divine artifact from the hands of the demons. Ever since Archimonde descended, the scourge was taken over, and my master is not happy. He thinks it's necessary to teach those arrogant demons a small lesson. Of course, as subordinates of the Burning Legion, we can't do it ourselves. When Arthas said this, Illidan finally smiled. This explanation made Illidan finally happy. As someone who had once joined the Burning Legion, even if it was just an act, he knew more about the Burning Legion than most creatures in the world. Any large organization in the world would definitely have its own faction. Other than the core of the Burning Legion, which was the Eridar clan, which was also known as the Demon Clan in the eyes of the people of Azeroth, there were also the Dreadlord clan and the Abyssal Lord clan. It was not surprising that there was an additional undead clan. Although none of them were good people, when it came to sincere cooperation, it was really laughable. From Tyron's brief explanation, Illidan knew that the Scourge army had been fighting for their lives in Azeroth for more than 10 years. Then, as soon as the Archerons arrived, they were taken advantage of. Illidan readily accepted Arthas's explanation. Alright, I'll go to the skull of Gul'Thin. Once I find out that you lied to me, even if I have to chase you to the ends of hell, I will let you taste the taste of pain. Just like that, the two men who stood at the peak of experts in this era separated from each other with their own little secrets. Arthas looked at the place where Illidan disappeared until she could no longer sense the evil night elf hero. She laughed coldly. Poor clown. Dance on the palm of His Majesty the Great Lich King. Originally, this little story would have ended here. Illidan would have fallen again, and the Lich King's Scourge army would have used this opportunity to escape from the Burning Legion's control. But, just as Arthas called for Kel Thuzad to open the portal, an accident happened. Crack! Without any warning, a golden light suddenly shot out from the void that was supposed to open the portal. Even though Arthas had fought many battles, he only had time to pull out a half-parry posture. It was a terrifying golden light that seemed to be able to split the entire chaotic dark world in half. The left shoulder of Arthas's epic armor was instantly shattered and evaporated in the golden light. Who is it? Although he was not injured, Arthas's shocked and angry voice was like that of a seriously injured beast. He had no idea who was sneaking up on him. Why would there be such a pure holy light user in the territory of the Night Elves who believed in the doctrine of nature? This was not some random paladin. The ones who came were definitely those who stood at the peak of the paladins. Arthas, who was screaming, did not intend to sit still and wait for death. Come out, my servant. An evil black aura suddenly exploded from his body. It was like throwing a big bomb into a calm lake. The sudden burst of dark power summoned more than 100 elite skeleton monsters in one breath. Some were giant bears that had been dead for a long time, and some were half-rotten nightsaber. They all broke through the shackles of the soil from all corners of the forest and crawled out to answer the call of their new master. However, it was useless. Another beam of golden light shot out from the void. It was different from the golden light just now. If the previous one was an invincible sword light, a sharpness that could cut through everything, then this one was a heavy hammer that could crush everything, a light that could purify the world. Arthas was incomparably shocked to find that the undead he had just summoned had actually turned into ashes in an instant. Around him, less than 10 centimeters above the ground, purple portals suddenly opened one by one in the air. What followed was a group of people that Arthas absolutely did not want to see. Alessandro? Are you here to avenge Tyrannus? Arthas bit his lip. You killed the king's father's unfilial son. You have no right to call your father and me by name." Mograin's face was ferocious, and he looked like a small sun burning with golden flames. "Arthas, after you killed your father, have you ever regretted it?" As if he was joking, but also as if he was talking about something extremely serious, Sidon Dathrahan, who was carrying a huge long-handled warhammer, stepped forward from the left of Arthas. "Don't talk too much to this fallen. Destroying evil is the duty of us holy light guardians." On Arthas' right, Turalian pointed the divine sword, Quell, Zarim, at Arthas' neck. Just these 3 paladins alone were enough to make Arthas' scalp tingle. And that was not all. Behind him was Duque, who had his arm around Queen Sylvanas' waist. A little further away were Lillis, Riadaline, Jaina, Ronan, and Kale, Tets. Other than Jaina, who seemed to be joining the battle, the other 4 were obviously guarding against the reinforcements that Arthas might find. An inescapable net. No way out. No way out. Fear from the depths of his soul spread throughout Arthas' body. Chapter 898. How is this possible? Why would Duque and his strongest subordinate appear here? Isn't this a top-secret mission that His Majesty the Lich King personally gave me? If Arthas could still sweat right now, then it would definitely be drenched in cold sweat. Other than the Lich King, only he and Kel Fizad knew about the matter of seducing Illidan. Unfortunately, there was no time for Arthas to think about life. The dazzling light arrived in a flash. Along with his long golden hair that fluttered in the wind, Mograine was even more terrifying than a roaring lion with its bloody mouth wide open. The gigantic Ashbringer came crashing down, and the golden holy light that came crashing down like a tidal wave was enough to make Arthas' soul tremble uncontrollably. This attack reminded him of his teacher, Uther. Perhaps this golden light was not as pure and holy as Uther's. It was even mixed with anger that could be exploited in the eyes of a schemer. However, hatred of evil was also a powerful spiritual power. Under the extremely exaggerated enhancement of this divine artifact, there was a moment when Arthas felt that her power of darkness was as insignificant as a boat that was about to be engulfed by a monstrous wave. If Arthas was still the Arthas who had just killed his father and had not yet completely fallen, he might have been defeated by this attack. Things were different now. He was not afraid of a mere Mograine. Invincible! The Death Knight called out to his beloved horse. The undead warhorse, which had been dead for a long time and had long been firmly connected to Arthas' soul, leaped out of the void. In the blink of an eye, it had already become one with Arthas and his horse. It was a charge that was almost beyond the limits of what the naked eye could see. Mograine's furious attack easily turned the 120-degree fan-shaped area in front of him into dust. Arthas and his beloved horse weren't within this range, and they managed to rush out at the last moment by a hair's breadth. If not for Turalian's extremely calm interception, Arthas' escape would have been perfect. However, Turalian, who was known as the calmest and most intelligent of the 5 Silver Saints, had the most vicious attack. He took a big step forward and swept his sword horizontally. It looked like an extremely slow sword, but just when you thought it was far away, it was already within your reach in the next instant. Just when Arthas thought that there was only 1 foot left, the golden edge of the divine sword had already sliced open Arthas' eyes. Left with no other choice, Arthas abruptly sucked in her abdomen and tilted her neck back to avoid Turalian's attack. Turalian's attack was obviously an open and above-board attack, but it looked like a sneak attack. At this time, Sidon's holy warhammer arrived. Unlike her 2 rich companions who had divine artifacts, Sidon's warhammer was only of the epic grade. Of course, he did not dare to fight the famous Frostmourne head-on. However, as one of the 5 Silver Saints and the most skilled Holy Knight, he was the first Holy Knight to be able to use his hammers so skillfully. His steps were steady, and he always left some leeway in his advance and retreat. Then, the feeling that his hammer gave others was an embroidery needle. He was clearly aiming for Arthas' left shoulder, yet the hammer had landed squarely on the right side of her ribs. Arthas hurriedly adjusted the position of Frostmourne, but without even making contact, the huge hammer was easily swung away. By the time Arthas realized that this was an incomparably gorgeous feint, Mograine's next sword had already swept over with the Holy Knight's holy seal. Arthas croaked, "Despicable! Is this the way of justice of Holy Knights?" As soon as she finished speaking, the 3 holy light blasters immediately sprayed. Justice only exists between the people of conscience. Turalyon was the most polite. Fallen one. Receiving the ultimate judgment is your only fate. Mograine fired directly. You want justice? I have the holy seal of justice here. Come take it. Saidan was as glib as ever. Beside him, Duque was also speechless. Was this idiot really stupid? Talking about justice with a bunch of people who were born as swindlers? A holy knight who could not use holy light to fool the enemy was not a good holy knight. Hadn't they heard of the story of the 5 kidney warriors and the goddess that could not be told? Not only were holy knights unkillable, if you really wanted to reason with them, you would not be able to deal with them. Perhaps this was why when Du dueled with a holy knight in the game, it would often turn into a bladder match, and whoever could hold in their urine the best would win, but in a war of attrition, Arthas with a normal brain knew that it was disadvantageous. The 2 holy light artifacts were a great threat to him. If it was a one-on-one, he was confident that he could win with the shameless trait of Frostmourne, but 1 against 2 was already a bit difficult. 1 against 3. Unless he opened up a gap in a short time, he would be exhausted to death. This was what Duque planned to do. After all, Arthas was not the Lich King who could beat up many strong people. So he knew that Arthas would definitely choose to break through. And the direction to break through was naturally Saidan Dathrahan. Among the 3 muscular men who were besieging the idiot, only he did not have an artifact. If he did not break through, who else would he break through? After hanging around in Azeroth for so long, Duque had figured out that the first prerequisite for the so-called hero domain was to become a professional who was proficient in the 3 major talents of the profession. For example, if a mage was not proficient in frost, fire, and arcane, they would be embarrassed to call themselves an archmage. As one of the 5 silver saints, Saidan of course liked to play with a 2-handed hammer. Like playing golf with a fly ball, a downward swing would directly hit a zombie's head dozens of meters away. This was his favorite entertainment on the battlefield. But against Arthas, Saidan could not be too careful. In the face of the counterattack of Frostmourne, since he was holding a 1-handed hammer in his right hand, Saidan's left hand was, of course, a shield. The epic shield that directly blocked was unsurprisingly destroyed by the rune greatsword. So what? Saidan had already predicted that the shield would explode. Even the direction of his arm to block was parallel to the magic sword. The moment the shield exploded, he directly diverted the force and dodged. Anyway, Mograine and Turalyon would be able to kill him in the next moment. What infuriated Arthas the most was that Saidan had brought more than a dozen epic-tier shields with him. He was constantly conjuring shields from his storage space. Even if one of them was destroyed, he would immediately replace it with another in the blink of an eye. One had to know that Arthas was almost taking the fierce attacks of the others. After dodging Mograine's slash with great difficulty, he had to take several attacks from Turalyon on unimportant parts before he found the opportunity to attack Saidan. Not to mention, he was also taking the surprise attacks of Sylvanas and the woman he once loved the most, Jaina. Chapter 899. It was no exaggeration to say that Arthas hated most of the top powerhouses of the Alliance. He killed his father and caused the blood of Rotterdam, Dalagen, and Kuel Salis to flow for thousands of miles. Even if it was not a direct hatred, it was an indirect one. Hence, when Sylvanas drew her bow, she even bit her lips. Scarlet blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Those who did not know better would think that she was injured. Injured? That was the psychological injury caused by the destruction of Queen Shi's favorite forest. Now, any high elf, a blood elf, would want to tear Arthas into pieces and feed him to the dogs. Of course, to Arthas, there were so many people who hated him. The strength of the Calamity Army, the number of people who hated him was equivalent to the number of people who hated him. He massacred at least 2 to 3 million people in Rotterdam and other places, then dug up their ancestral graves and let countless skeletons dance on them. If this was not mockery, then what was? He was the main culprit, the main tank, who specialized in attracting aggro. He definitely had a stable hold on the aggro. What was interesting was that there was still one person in the world who could steadily attract the aggro of this main tank and boss. That person's name was naturally Duke Marcus. Arthas became powerful after the fall. Of course, it was because he was talented enough. The other main reason was that he was the one who had fallen, and not those idiotic bones that had lost their sense of self. Those things, even if they had strong attributes, could easily find their flaws and destroy them. Hence, his hatred for Duque had never disappeared. Previously, Duque had used Jaina's illusion to tease him in front of the Dalajan city and asked his men to chop off one of his hands. Then, Jaina personally came to beat him up. The humiliation of being defeated. The humiliation of having his wife stolen. Almost the moment Duque appeared, Arthas's entire soul was ignited. After coming to this world, Duque had learned many things. However, there was one thing that he definitely did not learn well, and that was the etiquette of the palace. Many times, when he needed to use it, he would pull it out of the system and record it into his mind, then delete it. Duque didn't know that there was an ironclad rule for rulers and leaders, even if they were walking on the road. Didn't you see in the news that whenever Chief Number 1 appeared on the stage, he would always be the first one to appear before the others? Just now, when he casually walked out of the portal, the other people who wanted to surround Arthas were fine, standing in their respective positions. But Duque came out with his arm around Queen Sylvia's waist. It wasn't a ball. It had nothing to do with etiquette. In broad daylight, they directly hugged each other without any barriers. If you say that your sister is having an affair, you're really lying with your eyes wide open. All right, I'll pretend that I didn't see your passionate adultery, okay? The problem was Gianna. As soon as she appeared, she caught Arthas's attention. However, Jaina's position caused Arthas to feel a sense of humiliation and anger that came from the depths of her soul. It was a position with a special meaning. Among the nobles, only those with the same status could stand side by side. Only the king or the queen could stand next to the king. Duque was a Grand Duke. According to the rules, he was not qualified to appear side by side with Servanas, even if he came out of the portal. If you, Duque, are the commander of the alliance, according to your military rank, you shouldn't be. Well, even if you're the husband of the queen of the Sin, Dorii kingdom, you should still be half a step behind. Since ancient times, those who lived off women were looked down upon. The son-in-law of the Celestial Empire, the husband of the king of Azeroth, and so on, were all borrowed. They were used as mascots in important ceremonies, but usually, they were trash. Why should Jaina, who wore the queen's crown, be half a step behind Duque on the left? She was further than the subjects, but closer than the queen. What position was that? Please refer to the relationship between the former king of Kultiras, Dalen, and Jaina Goldsword. If Arthas could still deceive himself with the lame reason that the 3-meter-wide portal was slightly narrow when he first appeared, then as the battle went on, he could no longer deceive himself. Why was Servanas able to fire at full strength and play with aimed shooting that needed to be charged up? It was because other than a few paladins, she had Duque to protect her. Jaina was also protecting Duque. Sometimes, she even intentionally or unintentionally blocked Arthas' death's grasp. Arthas always had a faint attachment to his childhood sweetheart. He even asked Kel Thuzad if there was a way to turn Jaina into an undead while preserving her beauty. There were many answers. Death Banshee or Corpse Maiden could do it. Finding a chance to make Jaina's soul fall, then turning Jaina into the person of his dreams through an evil death ritual. Then he would rule Lordaeron forever. This was one of the few dreams that Arthas had other than licking the Lich King. Arthas had always been paying attention to Jaina. Many of the cult of the damned who were lurking among the humans kept leaking information to him. Ordinary believers were purely spiritual depravity. They did not have any evil power in their bodies, so the holy light could not detect them. He also knew that Jaina's engagement was broken off by Duque. This was undoubtedly a great humiliation to the female side. Arthis even felt that his chance had come. But now, everything was broken. He never thought that Jaina, who had already broken off the engagement and inherited the throne, would still be protecting Duque and Duque's new love. This kind of discomfort was 1,000,000 times more painful than being thrown into the flames of death. He finally couldn't take it anymore and roared at Jaina. Lebaliu, this sentence stunned almost everyone present. Then, Jaina gritted her teeth and replied in an ancient language. Second Fool was unwilling to give up and asked again. In the end, Jaina added cruelly. Everyone felt as if someone had pressed Arthis's face against the ground and rubbed it a dozen times. His entire person was gloomy, like a dog that had lost its life. Suddenly, the dark power in Second Fool's body exploded. He used almost a quarter of the dark power in his body as a bomb and sent everyone flying with a violent explosion. But it was only to make space. It was not to escape, nor to kill the enemy. In a sense, it was a waste of power. He was definitely the one who suffered a great loss. Everyone felt that something big had happened in the conversation just now because Arthis's face looked like he was about to collapse. Saidan, who was the most nosy of them all, asked Mograine directly, "What did His Majesty Proudmoore do just now? It feels more effective than us smashing Arthis 100 times. Mograine understood quite a bit, but he did not dare to say anything. Even if he understood, he would pretend not to. He stammered, "It seems to be ancient Arthi." Chapter 900. 2,800 years ago, Thoradin the Great unified the human race. The Arathar Empire rose from the Arthi Highlands, so the ancient Arthi language was the predecessor of today's common human language. But with the passage of time, the ancient Arthi language, which was difficult to pronounce and full of meaningless meaning, became a ceremonial language that was only used by the royal families and ceremonial officials during the most important sacrificial ceremonies. Except for the true aristocrats or ceremonial officials who had been passed down for nearly 3,000 years, no one would learn it. There were so many people present, and they were either elves who disdained learning the human race's special language, or a bunch of human powerhouses who were born ordinary people. It was reasonable to say that even Mograine, who was more like a warrior, could not understand all of it. There would not be a fourth person present who could understand it. But looking at Arthis, who was trembling all over, and Jaina, whose chest was heaving up and down, Duze was extremely annoyed. Ever since he crossed over to Azeroth, Duze's system elves would collect all the sounds around him, regardless of whether Duque noticed or not, and would automatically analyze and translate them. So when Duque said that Azeroth was the overlord of all languages, it was absolutely not an exaggeration. So Duque understood it. In layman's terms, the 4 sentences were, Arthis, why do you have to help Duque? Jaina, because your boss, Archimonde, killed my father, big brother, and other relatives. I want revenge. I want to destroy the Burning Legion. At this point, at least it was politically correct, wasn't it? But from the 3rd sentence onwards, the meaning changed. Arthis called for surrender. There is no hope for this world. The Burning Legion is destined to win. Why don't you come earlier? Even if you were once Duque's fiancé, I don't mind. I will make you my queen and rule the world of Azeroth forever. If there is a chance, I will help you overthrow the Burning Legion. Words should not be spoken carelessly. Since ancient times, many people had lost their heads because of the wrong words. If it were not for the Lich King Nizul's rebellion, Arthis, as Nizul's loyal dog, would not have dared to say such words. He thought that he had truly fallen and was ruthless, but his memories and once lost emotions still made him impulsive. As soon as he spoke the truth, he regretted it. If Jaina really gave in, he would feel that he had profited. Duke and Servanas, that adulterous couple, are showing off their love. It blinded your eyes. Miss G, he doesn't love you at all. Why do you have to suffer with him? Why don't you come here and be a queen? Who knew that Jaina's ultimate weapon would descend without warning at this moment? The original text could no longer be examined. Anyway, the sentence that Duque's system elf translated for Duque was very old-fashioned. I'd rather be the concubine of a hero than the wife of a monster. It was no wonder that the noble Prince Arthas Menethil, the self-proclaimed king of Lordaeron, had suffered 100 million damage to his soul. Throw them out of the atmosphere and straight into space. Are there any? Jaina actually declared, even if I become the queen of the 7 kingdoms of the humans. I'd rather be a nameless mistress for Duque than be the queen of Arthas. This was practically digging out his burning heart, throwing it on the ground and smashing it into pieces. Then, spitting on it, peeing on it, and soaking it in a cesspool for 49 days. Finally, pulling it out and parading it on the streets for the world to know. Saying it was an insult was overestimating the word insult. Tie his body to the pillar of shame and whip it for 10,000 years was not enough to describe the humiliation he had suffered. Arthas broke down. On the other side, Duque bared his teeth and thought, damn, no wonder Jaina became the heroine of history. With this mockery, she is clearly the #1 main tank in the alliance. What was tragic was that Duque had to pretend not to understand. He asked Jaina with concern, what did you say just now? Why did Arthas' expression change so much? Even though Jaina was thick-skinned, she still felt ashamed when she recalled what she had said in a fit of anger. Even the fair skin above her breastplate that was exposed to the air was flushed seductively. Oscar Award winner Best Actress Jaina puffed out her chest and sucked in her stomach as she spoke righteously. She looked as if her skin was flushed due to excessive excitement. This despicable and shameless demon who killed his father and teacher and slaughtered millions of lives of various races actually has the cheek to ask me to be his empress. I have mercilessly rejected him. Damn it. Truly merciless. The future Lich King, a super boss who was originally an incomparably famous villain in history, was completely trampled on by you. Alright. A certain Du was secretly delighted in his heart. This was not the social butterfly Jaina who had romantic entanglements with several powerhouses in the original history. In this life, Jaina had been sent to the Marcus residence when she was still a lowly. She had been a disciple and had been a widow for 10 years without marrying Duque. He had even cruelly broken off their engagement. She was still the original even now. If there was anyone who had wronged someone, it would definitely be Duque who had wronged Jaina. If this was some fantasy novel about breaking off an engagement, and Ji Outyen was the male lead, then Jaina would definitely be Ji Outyen. But this noble Jaina, who was now a queen, had actually said such words out of excitement. How could Duque not be pleased? Even if he didn't dare to show it on his face. It was so good that it felt like all the pores on his body had eaten a ginseng fruit. If he could like Jaina's post, Duke would definitely hire 10,000 people to give Jaina 1 trillion likes and send Jaina straight to the headlines. Compared to Jaina's move, Ji Outyen's following performance as a movie queen was nothing. Jaina pretended to be frightened and stood behind Duke. She hugged Duke's right arm with both hands and clamped his right arm with a pair of magic peaks exaggeratedly. She said, Duke, I accidentally angered this demon. You must protect me. Alright. No problem. Leave it to me. Duque, who often looked like a hero but was actually a coward, really took care of everything this time. Ji Outyen had already said so much. If you don't protect her and let her be snatched away to be the wife of a ghost, are you still a male pig? This time, not only Duque stood in front of Jaina, the 3 holy knights also quickly adjusted their positions. Mograine and Turayan were like 2 door gods, standing in front of Duque, one on the left and one on the right, while Sidon stood behind Arthas. Duque hooked his right index finger at the 2 idiots in an extremely pretentious manner. Come on, let's hurt each other. Chapter 901. Mutual Damage My Asteriscus. Although the Alliance had gathered almost all of their strongest players to fight Arthas as if he was a boss, everyone knew that they were in trouble this time. Last time, the Alliance and Horde powerhouses besieged Arthas near the Dalajan, but they did not manage to take him down. The most important reason was that Frostmourne was too overpowered. Not only was it extremely sharp, But it also healed itself, weakened the enemy's will, released frost aura, and many other powerful effects. Ordinary epic weapons could not do anything to Arthas. If they were to fight head-on, the weapon would be broken in one hit. This was simply a collision between a bronze sword and a steel sword. There was no solution. Otherwise, why would they have to sacrifice Orgrim? At that time, of course, it was because the Dreadlord had saved him, but ultimately, it was because the Alliance and Horde were not strong enough. But today was different. Quell, Zarum, and Ashbringer, the two artifacts, held the fort. Sidon focused on defense, and Servanas madly dealt damage. Speaking of which, the surrounding powerhouses, including Duque, did not do much from the beginning to the end. Not to mention one Dreadlord, even if half a dozen came, Duque was confident that he could hold on for more than 15 minutes. After all, not every Dreadlord was as powerful as he was. Moreover, Illidan had already gone to find trouble with the boss of the Dreadlord, Tichondrius. Therefore, there were only 3 Dreadlords who were truly qualified to effect this battle. Excluding those who were still in charge of Lordaeron, there was only one Dreadlord who could come. Moreover, the Dreadlord was following Archimonde's orders to take over the Scourge army. Under normal circumstances, no one would come to save Arthas except for the people from Nazul's line. Now was the time when Nazul's line was at its weakest. After thinking about it, the only one who would come to save the two fools was the loyal Kel Thuzad. But a Kel Thuzad wanted to save them? That was underestimating the Alliance. Almost at the same time as Jaina provoked Arthas again and sought refuge with Duque, a portal suddenly appeared less than 2 meters away from Arthas. At the same time, several huge portals the size of basketball courts appeared above everyone's heads. From inside, countless powerful undead monsters poured down as if they were free. Go, it was Kel Thuzad's voice. Arthas suddenly came to a realization. That's right. Everything was AF * King Provocation. It wasn't easy to catch him, and the Alliance couldn't wait for him to fight to the death with these musclemen. Arthas could not help but feel a surge of warmth in her heart. How ironic. Who would have thought that in the end, it wasn't the great Lichinastrian who came to save him. Instead, it was Kel Thuzad, who he had single-handedly killed, who pulled him back at the crucial moment. Hey! I didn't waste half of the Sunwell's power to resurrect you in vain. This was what Arthas thought. The experts on the periphery, who had been idling for a long time, immediately perked up. Ha! Riadaline bellowed. The hammer and shield in her hand clashed, producing a crisp clanging sound. Even as a woman, her long experience in frontline battles made every move of hers filled with fierce pressure. Of course, she knew that she was not the main force of the assault force. In terms of long-range damage output, the nearby players completely outclassed her. Originally, Lilith pulling the bowstring 4 times in a second and firing 3 times each time was already very crazy. But compared to Ronan and Kael, who were in a human-shaped artillery formation, she was still very weak. Just as the 3 holy knights surrounded Arthas, the 2 radiant moon archmages, who were second only to Breaking Dawn archmages, quickly constructed a temporary medium-sized war magic formation. That's right, it was not a small one, but the medium-sized one. Powerful magic stones that were enough to make an ordinary radiant moon archmage a lifetime's worth were inserted into the nodes of the magic formation as if they were free of charge, acting as the magic formation's auxiliary source of magic power. Almost at the same time that the elite undead monsters in the sky emerged from the teleportation portal, violent firepower shot up like countless fireworks from the ground, producing all kinds of strange sounds as they soared into the sky. It was 2 torrential magic rains that seemed to violate the laws of nature, falling from the ground to the sky. Ronan's arcane storm and Kael, skyrocketing fire pillar easily tore the terrifying monsters that these elite holy knights would need to spend a long time to deal with into pieces. The body parts that fell from the sky didn't even fall to the ground before they were blown up by the seemingly endless magic attacks, turning into even finer pieces. Of course, all of this was just a diversion. The focus was never on these elite undead monsters. Seeing that the cannon fodder couldn't interfere with the Alliance's hunting team, Arthas couldn't help but spit in his heart. He had to rely on himself. Unfortunately, just as he swung his sword fiercely at Mograine and Turalian, using the terrifying evil energy to form a sword ray to avoid them and was about to step into the teleportation portal, suddenly, there was a crisp explosion from the portal in front of him. It was like the sound of a glass mirror being smashed. In Arthas's ears, this was undoubtedly the sound of destruction. Using his elemental senses, he sensed who the culprit was. Following the direction of his senses, Arthas saw an unsurprising fellow, Duke Marcus. Even though Duque seemed to be just a bystander, in reality, Duque was the key to this hunt. Without Duque, Arthas could be rescued at any time. As soon as Duque made his move, he crushed the teleportation portal that could have allowed the second fool to escape from the tragedy. Traversing tens of thousands of miles of space, sensing the location he wanted to teleport to, and then eliminating the obstacles in the spatial passageway between the teleportation portals, or directly creating a spatial passageway to avoid all the spatial cracks. Was this something a mortal could do? Absolutely impossible. Before the magic civilization had gone through a few transformations in Azeroth and then flourished, the teleportation portal was the patent of the Radiant Moon Pharaoh and above. If one wanted to use it well, one had to be at least a Breaking Dawn. It wasn't that Duque's spatial magic was completely superior to Thuzad's, but that Duque had the advantage of being closer. At this time, it was already very impressive for human archers to be able to shoot 50 steps on flat ground. Any further and it would be useless. It was the same for magic. The further the distance, the more power was reduced. Thuzad, who was still in Lordaeron, wanted to cross space to save the second fool, but did he ask Duque? Duque didn't even need to spend a lot of effort to crush Thuzad's unstable teleportation portals. Arthas's entire body convulsed. He was angry. Not only was he angry at Duque for kicking him into a corner, he was also angry at Duque's actions. Chapter 902. That was because it wasn't Jaina who was hugging Duque, but Duque, who was acting righteously, was protecting Jaina. Yes, he was hugging her back with his right hand, while his wrist went under Jaina's armpit and hugged her. Although the claw seemed to be subconsciously resting on the right side of her breastplate, it looked like that bastard Duque was holding her breasts. Jaina wasn't an idiot, nor was she an ordinary woman. The ice element surrounding her body was connected to her magic circuit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the ice element around her was her second layer of skin. How could she not sense Duque's little action? What the hell was that she had said those harsh words? She would rather be Duque's lover than Arthas' queen. Now that your lover is here, if Arthas notices anything that you're unwilling to do, everything that you've done before will be for nothing. Jaina even began to suspect that Duque, who was a bumpkin in the eyes of other nobles, didn't understand ancient Arthi. But that wasn't the point. Jaina had never rejected Duque from the beginning. Unfortunately, a woman chasing a man with a veil was a deadly veil that she couldn't pierce even after a dozen years. Furthermore, after Duque supported her in developing Theramore and promised to help her kill Archimonde on Mount Hyjal, her sincerity, which she had never truly given, seemed to be showing signs of melting. It had nothing to do with a terrible and helpless political deal. It was purely the admiration of a strong woman toward a man who was willing to support her career. It was the faint admiration of a woman toward a hero who was willing to help her take revenge. So what if I'm a lover? Even if I'm a lover, it's better than becoming the queen of an ugly, undying monster. Jaina really thought that way and did it. Even though she knew that Duque was mocking Arthas and that it was likely an act, Jaina didn't mind making it real. So, she snuggled into Duque's arms with a satisfied and incomparably seductive expression. She wanted to take revenge on Arthas with her actions. That's right. It was you who summoned Archimonde, you bastard. No matter how much I hate my father, even if I can't inherit the throne because of my big brother, that's still my family's business. It's your fault that the demon you released killed my father and big brother's family. You are also my enemy. Jaina, the social butterfly in history and the movie queen of this world, played the role of a lover brilliantly. She didn't mind the existence of Servanas, who was theoretically Duque's legal wife. Her vivid expression was clearly saying, "Darling, harder, harder." The movie queen's performance provoked Arthes's anger. Very rarely, when Thuzad's rescue became impossible, Arthes lost her mind. "Ah!" As Arthes shouted, the frostmorn in his hand suddenly changed. The long and wide blade instantly became dark and gloomy, like the suction of a long vacuum cleaner, swallowing the dark power within an unknown radius of countless kilometers. Then, Arthes began to charge. It was a death charge that contained the strongest power he could gather. Every step he took on the ground would cause darkness within dozens of steps. Plants would wither, and all living things would wither. Mograine and Turalian used both hands to hold the divine weapons in their hands tightly. The golden light of Ashbringer and Quel'Thuazarum became even more dazzling and resplendent. An opponent who was enraged to the point of losing his mind was the best prey in the eyes of a hunter. But the craziness of a cornered beast meant that one mistake would cost them their lives. Every strong person's face was full of solemnity. Finally, the first attack without any fancy moves came. It was an extremely simple head-on chop. It was a posture without any technical content. Almost every warrior had practiced this chop tens of thousands of times since they were young. It was because it was simple that it was pure. Mograine could dodge, but he couldn't. Behind him were Duque and Jaina, and further away was Ronan, who was standing in the magic circle and unable to move. He could retreat, Duque and Jaina could retreat, but Ronan would definitely be out of luck. They were going to fight the Arkherons soon. If possible, it was best to preserve the combat power of every strong person. Moreover, speaking of righteousness, Mograine had never been afraid of anyone after obtaining Ashbringer. In the next second, a heavy collision of light against darkness, strength against strength, shook everyone's eardrums. Bang! It wasn't the clanging sound of metal colliding, but the surging explosion of two masses of energy colliding. The entire world seemed to be divided into two halves at this moment. To the south was Mograine's blazing light. To the north was Arthes's cold darkness. Light and darkness collided violently, bursting forth in this place. Within a radius of 100 meters, everything that had nothing to do with light and darkness was crushed into powder by the violent energy. Unfortunately, this was the decaying Fellwood forest, which was filled with the power of death and evil. In a sense, this was already half of Arthes's home ground. Mograine was very strong. His wild and pure holy light was amplified by Ashbringer, and he could suppress Arthes in terms of individual strength. However, Arthes never fought alone. Frostmorn stored the power of darkness refined from nearly 10 million vengeful spirits. Arthes, who was going all out, sent Mograine flying in a single blow. But it didn't matter. In the next moment, Turalian had already arrived. Without giving Arthes any time to react, Quel'Thuazarum's golden light dazzled Arthes's undead vision. Another head-on collision of light and darkness. This time, it was launched while Arthes's old strength had just dissipated, and he hadn't recovered yet. Turalian was halfway to success. The brilliant golden light suppressed the dark light, causing Arthes to stagger and take 3 steps back. Good chance. Saidan Dathrahan seized this opportunity and pounced from behind Arthes. Arthes's rune sword had been hit to the left. In Saidan's view, this fallen prince had only 2 directions to attack. One was to take advantage of the situation and stab Frostmorn from the left, but this would hit the big shield that Arthes had prepared. The other option was to use a stronger force to pull out the sword and turn around to slash. This was certainly powerful, but the problem was that such a move would take more time. If he couldn't hit the enemy, everything would be useless. Saidan also guarded against the right. But the terrifying Frostmorn stabbed from an angle that Saidan never expected. It wasn't until the evil black blade pierced through the armor and muscles of his chest that he realized what had happened. Arthes pierced his abdomen with the magic sword and then stabbed him. Mortals would die together in this way, but Arthes was an undead. Chapter 903. If Sidon Dathrahan had not stepped into the realm of heroes, such a tricky and mysterious attack would have killed him. As one of the strongest warriors in the human camp, Sidon's speed and reflexes were undoubtedly beyond his prime. At 33 years old, he was in the prime of a man's life. Perhaps his speed and reflexes were not as good as when he had just become a paladin. After all, he was only 18 years old. But after so many years of military life, his combat skills and awareness were undoubtedly at the peak. From the beginning of the Second World War at the Dark Portal to the second invasion led by Nazul, to the repeated tug-of-war with Grom Hellscream's Warsong clan in the Tirisful woodlands, Sion had always been on the front line. So in the end, even though Frostmourne had already pierced through the line of defense formed by his sword and shield like a venomous snake and pierced through his chest armor, he could even feel the instant pain from his chest and the numbness from the ice seal. Even though the bystanders cried out in shock and everyone thought he was going to die, he did not give up. It was a backward lean similar to the Iron Bridge of China's Kung Fu. In Azeroth's combat training, there had never been such a posture. Lordaeron's swordsmanship training focused on the extremely strict T-step, where the toes were almost 90 degrees apart. This way, whether it was advancing or retreating, moving left or right, it was very flexible. However, only experienced warriors who had fought against the Horde for a long time would understand that in the face of enemies like the orcs, whose strength and speed were far superior to their own, the T-step was nonsense. In the face of such overwhelming power, as long as he used any method, no matter how pathetic he was, he could teach those flawed orcs a lesson after dodging the first blow. Sidon knew that if he leaned back like this, as long as Arthas's magic sword pressed down, he would still be a corpse. In that case, he would at most live for a tenth of a second longer than before. But he had to gamble. He gambled that someone would come to save him in the next moment. This person would not be Mograine or Turalian. Both of them had tried their best. Then, would the final redemption in despair come? Sidon prayed in the darkest of despair. Then he saw light. Golden light. Normally, non-clerics could not have golden light. However, the unquestionable divine aura told him that it was indeed holy light. Sidon's mouth was wide open. It was as if he had seen the arrival of an angel who could slay evil and exorcise demons. Although the angel looked very strange, he was wearing the typical Stormwind blue and white knight's uniform with gold trim, but he was not wearing a single piece of armor. The angel who descended from the sky held a staff that emanated a purplish-blue radiance in one hand and a golden holy sword that seemed to be used for important rituals in the other. It was a sword that was extremely precise. That was also a sword that saved lives. Like the most dexterous tailor in the world, it accurately pierced Frostmourne's blade like a needle. If it was an ordinary epic-ranked longsword, it would be impossible to block or delay Arthas' demonic sword in the slightest. However, this sword exuded the same holy radiance as Quell, Zarum. Dang! A crisp sound tugged at everyone's heartstrings. A miracle had happened. The slender holy sword miraculously forced away the blade of Frostmourne that was about to slash down. Even though Arthas had already lowered his wrist with force, it was this difference of a millimeter that caused his sword to slash diagonally to the right instead of downwards. It was this little barrier between life and death that Sidon grasped. His right shoulder sank, and he rolled on the ground in a very ugly manner. In the end, he escaped the fate of having his intestines cut open. This was not without a price. The breastplate on his right chest was shattered into pieces, and a terrifying wound that was 4 centimeters deep was pulled out horizontally on his chest. A black icy aura was corroding Sidon's body at a high speed. Without even a tenth of a second of hesitation, Sion Dathrahan directly used his ultimate move. Holy Healing! It was a peerless ultimate move that could reverse life and death at a critical moment. Paladins who had not stepped into the realm of heroes were not even qualified to use this ultimate move. The core of this move was to exhaust every drop of power in the user's body, every bit of holy light, and then instantly erupt to heal the target. As long as the target was still breathing, he could instantly restore his HP and resurrect on the spot. Under the dazzling holy light, not only did the wound on Sidon's chest recover in the blink of an eye, but it also forced out all the icy aura and dark power that Frostmourne had left in his body. Of course, such a heaven-defying ultimate move was not without a price. A moment ago, Sidon was still lively and strong like a bull, but now his mental state was like that of an old man in his 70s or 80s, extremely dispirited. After all, this was a life-saving ultimate move that squeezed out all of his essence, energy, and spirit. From his stamina, to his magic power, to his vitality, and to his spirit, everything was drained. When the angel used the perfect, arcane impact to send Sidon flying out of the main battlefield and to the side of another paladin, Riadaline, the people who were relieved suddenly discovered the truth of the angel. Damn, why does this guy look exactly like Duque? That's impossible? No. This guy is Duque. Turning to the side, Arthas's expression was extremely ferocious. This was a counterattack that he had planned for a long time, but it was ruined by an unexpected person. And that person was the person he hated the most, Duque. How is this possible? Forcefully pulling Frostmourne out of his body, the wound made a rotting sound like rotten wood being sawed. At the same time, Arthas once again parried the attacks from Mograine and Turalian. It's you. Arthas didn't even look at the two paladins as he stared at Duque, who had a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right. On the other side, Sidon, who had barely escaped death, subconsciously clutched his chest. With Riadaline's support, he looked up weakly. Damn it. Don't tell me that you, a Breaking Dawn archmage, are actually a warrior. Hearing Sidon's teasing tone, Turalian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Since he could still joke, it meant that he wouldn't die. No matter what, Sidon owed Duque his life. Speaking of which, since when did Duque become a close combat professional? But it didn't matter. This was comrade-in-arms. A comrade-in-arms surprise was always better than an enemy's shock. A sense of trust evolved from gratitude arose spontaneously in his heart. However, a new problem arose. Without Sidon Dathrahan, the situation of the siege was broken. Everyone knew that even though Riadaline had also stepped into the realm of heroes, she was still far from the strongest of the 5 Silver Saints. Chapter 904. At this time, both sides resumed their stalemate. Jaina's expression turned ugly. This is your plan? Arthas waved his magic sword, and a wave of icy ripples appeared in the area. Plan? This is all part of your plan. I fell for it. I really fell for it. At this time, Arthas turned to look at Duque and revealed a cruel smile. Do you know? Duque, you're really good at using people's hearts. You've provoked me. You and Jaina have really hurt my heart. Unfortunately, you don't have any humanity left. But you've always pretended to have humanity. Duque said with absolute certainty. Human nature was indeed a burden. If it was me in the past, I would have fallen for it. Arthas's smile was full of mockery. He turned to Jaina again. Of course, if you hadn't provoked my terrible memories, I might not have done anything. I would have just completed the task given to me by my lord. But if there's a chance, I don't mind turning all the women Duke Marcus cares about into corpses, and all the men into death knights or liches. Corpses? Although he didn't understand what it was, he could infer from the words that it was most likely to turn beautiful princesses into undead for viewing and obscene entertainment. Jaina's face instantly turned red. Not only was she angry at these words, but also because she had just pretended to be a lover. Whether it was real or fake, she looked like a clown now. Was it easy for a dignified queen to put on a show here? Fortunately, Duque helped Jaina out. Your Majesty Proudmoore, it's been hard on you to test the waters. Please leave the rest to me. Send Thorham to Theramore first, then come back as soon as possible. Jaina did as she was told. Test? Perhaps it was a test, or perhaps it was an act. Anyway, it seemed like a super boss like Arthas who could fight and take damage. Duque really didn't expect to kill him in one go. In order to make this unstable factor leave the battlefield as soon as possible, regardless of whether it was the goddess of fate causing trouble or if other existences suddenly intervened, Duque had to kill Arthas here. Even if he took a step back, he could at least ensure that he would not be able to participate in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. That's right, Arthas did not appear in the historical Battle of Mount Hyjal. He and Nazul were also excluded from the main force of the Burning Legion because they belonged to Kill Jaden. Duque did not dare to gamble. After all, even Karzak could defy history and jump out, and even Deathwing could be killed in advance. Duque really didn't know if Archimonde would let Arthas take the bullet if he was forced into a corner. Duke didn't dare to imagine what would happen if another superboss entered the fray in such a tense situation. At that time, it wouldn't just be a bloodbath, it would be total annihilation. Now, reality had proven that the power of a radiant moon was completely useless against Arthas. Jaina's icicles, frost arrows, and whatnot were all automatically disintegrated before they could even get within a 5-meter radius of Arthas. In a physical sense, they instantly disintegrated into water vapor, followed by wandering frost elementals. What's worse was that the wandering frost elementals were being used by Arthas. And Duque sensed for a moment. Even with his Breaking Dawn strength, he still couldn't deal much damage to Arthas, who was basically a demigod. In his heart, Duque spat fiercely. But it didn't matter. Duque got into a stance and muttered in his heart, "All right. Now, my left hand is staff maker, and my right hand is sword seller. 10 meters away, I'll lower your IQ. 100 meters away, I'm asking you, how are you going to block it?" Taking a deep breath, Duque got into a stance. In this era where battle mages were still a novelty, Duque's stance, which was written as a mage, was read as a berserker. Let alone the enemy, even his own people were dumbfounded. "Alexandros, Turalian, you two go. I'll use a phantom clone to support you." Mograine and Turalian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Duque wasn't a true melee fighter, and he didn't have any teamwork. If that small body of his rushed over, they really didn't know how to cooperate. That's right, Duque wasn't short, and he also had steel-like muscles, but he wasn't wearing any armor. Although no armor could block a full blow from Frostmourne, if an elite ghoul came, their epic armor would be useful. Fortunately, Duque was a phantom, and he came to help. The battle started again. Now, it was Mograine and Turalian in the vanguard, flanking Arthas from the left and right. Queen Sylvanas continued to wait for opportunities to shoot arrows, and the berserker Duque shouted, "May the holy light shine on you," and rushed forward. No one expected the situation to be completely different. A phantom of Duque appeared 10 meters in front of Arthas. It did nothing but cast speed reduction on the fool. The magic of a Breaking Dawn mage could affect a demigod, even if it was very slight, but Turalian and Turalian immediately felt the difference. Life and death were on the line, and this was no exaggeration. The other phantom was even more savage. Holding a staff in its left hand and a sword in its right, it directly turned into a thief and rushed forward, stabbing Arthas's back. Arthas was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. He was a dead man. He used his advantage as an immortal to the limit. He had used his broken arm to kill Orgrim. He had also used his own body to almost kill a general of the Alliance. However, he had never seen such a shameless person. He actually used his doppelganger to rush over with 2 weapons and launch a barrage of attacks. As a human, there were too many places to defend. If a leg was cut off, he wouldn't be able to walk. If an arm was cut off, he wouldn't be able to attack. If an artery was pierced, he would bleed to death. And if a vital point was injured, he would also die. But how could a phantom with 2 weapons have any weak points? Either he directly destroyed these 2 weapons, or he crossed the distance of nearly 100 meters to attack Duque's body. Otherwise, Arthas would only be left with the option of being beaten up. If Duque's 2 weapons were trash or just simple magic attacks, Arthas wouldn't care at all. The problem was that these 2 weapons were a demigod, Obsidian Queen, and the other was a strange holy sword that looked like a phantom of Quell Zarum, which was a divine weapon. One was used as a milk bottle to supply mana, while the other was agilely stabbing at the wound that was caused by the idiot just now. Frostmourne pierced Arthas's abdomen, but it didn't cause any real damage. But when it pierced through, It also pierced through the ink-black skeleton armor on Arthesa's body. Since it was a phantom that went up, the shameless Duque directly let the phantom stab at a speed of more than a dozen times per second, playing with the holy sword like a flower sword and stabbing non-stop. Look at my sword manipulation technique. Du Xiaoyao smirked. Chapter 905. The undead were never afraid of physical attacks. Arrows and piercing weapons had been proven useless in countless battles. The best choice was holy light, followed by magic. If there was no other choice, one could at least use a large hammer to smash the undead into pieces and immobilize them. At first, Arthas looked down on Duque for using a rapier. But he soon realized that he was wrong. And very wrong. The shameless Duque was actually cheating the special effect. All weapons' special effects had activation limits. For example, how many attacks could it be used once, and how many seconds could it be used once? The key was that activating the special effect needed to be charged. However, Duque, who knew all this, charged the holy sword like he was loading bullets into a pistol. The Obsidian Queen, in the clone's left hand, ensured that the holy sword could be replenished with magic. And on the clone, Duque left Alonso's Fail's moral gold coin. In the 10 years that he was sent into the void with Karazhan, Duque did not think that this gold coin, which was connected to his mind, was very powerful. With his return, Duque suddenly realized that this gold coin was not as simple as he thought. For example, Mediva's moral was used up after it was used. If Mediva's moral was a disposable alkaline battery, then Alonso's Fail's spiritual gold coin was a rechargeable battery that could be recharged again and again. Under the careful analysis of the system, it was found that it could absorb the prayers of devout believers who believed in the doctrine of the holy light within 100 meters and increase the moral inside. Oh, it was the power of the holy light. This was the biggest reason why Duque could use the moral gold coin as a weapon. Now, Duque put this gold coin into the clone. So a strange scene appeared on the battlefield. Compared to Mograine's Ashbringer, which was as huge as a door, the unknown holy sword that Duque's clone was holding was as thin as an embroidery needle. But it was this embroidery needle that made a terrifying explosion. The special effect, Holy Arrow, would be triggered 2 to 3 times every second, and from an outsider's point of view, it was even fiercer than the Dwarven tank squad's cannons. It was accompanied by the incessant sounds of chi-chi-chi-chi-chi. With a whooshing sound, Duque relied on the agility of the holy sword to continuously send holy light into the wound on Arthas' back. Because Arthas Frostmourne was too large, it was like a cannon hitting a mosquito. It could not hit Duque's holy sword at all. Doppelganger? Chop if you want. In any case, it was just a virtual image. It didn't matter if you cut it in half or split it in half. As long as you didn't hit the 2 weapons and the spirit coin in the doppelganger, no matter how many doppelgangers you destroyed, Duke would be able to summon another one in the next moment. Continue selling swords. Continue crafting the staff. This also increased the success rate of Queen Sylvie's sneak attacks. This scene made all the experts of the Alliance who were paying attention to the battle excited. Jaina's beautiful eyes shone brightly. No. Impossible. Arthas screamed. As Thuzad's attempt to open a portal was interrupted by Duque's main body again, everyone knew that the scales of victory were tipping towards the Alliance. More than once, Arthas wanted to rush over and use Death's Grasp to catch Duque. In the end, he was either interrupted by Turalian and Mograine, or Riadaline, who was fully focused, used Holy Light to defeat Arthas. The Blood Elf Paladin could not fight against Frostmourne. But it did not mean that he could not deal with Arthas's dark magic, which was not too strong. She used her slightly slender body as a shield, blocking in front of Duque's main body. Since ancient times, quantitative change had always easily led to qualitative change. After being hit too many times, Arthas could not take it anymore. He gave up on his humanity, only making his evil soul purer and able to accommodate more dark power. After all, he was not a Lich King at this point in time, and he did not have the terrifying strength to kill young Salyafar in one move after becoming a Lich King. After Arthas's waist was hit by Holy Arrow, for the 100th time, the holy energy that had accumulated in his abdomen finally affected his movements. First, Mograine's powerful horizontal slash forced him to take it head-on. Then, Turalian's quell, Zalim, without any fancy moves, shattered Arthas' right pauldron and pierced straight into his right arm. Arthas howled like a trapped beast, but it did not help. Taking advantage of the fact that he was not holding the magic sword firmly, Mograine used his strength to press down on the magic sword's blade. Then he immediately slashed from another angle, aiming at the fallen prince's abdomen that had accumulated a lot of holy light. This time, there was no escape. The strengthened frost armor could not save Arthas. The evil power of darkness was instantly melted by the light of Ashbringer. The giant sword slashed into his abdomen, triggering a chain reaction of holy light inside. Finally, under this dazzling strike, under the gaze of nearly 10 pairs of Alliance powerhouses, the fallen prince, Arthas Menethil, who killed his father and master, was cut in half by Mograine's divine weapon, the giant sword. The lower half of his body, which was still twitching, was still shaking on the spot, but he did not fall. Because of the momentum, Arthas' upper body flew up and fell a few meters away. Everyone knew that this was not the end. Duque shouted, "Last hit." Although Turalian did not understand why it was the last hit and not the sword, it did not affect his actions. Almost as soon as Arthas' body flew away from his sword, Turalian suddenly stomped on the ground and flew out. He raised the divine sword, Quell Azalim, high and slashed at Arthas again. As long as the sword struck Arthas' head, the almighty fallen prince who had brought disaster to most of the Rotterdam kingdom would become history after that moment. That's right, the undead could be resurrected. But the premise was that the soul was still there. Paladins did not have the power to expiate evil spirits, but it did not mean that the divine weapons of the holy system did not exist. In order to deal with Arthas, Duque collected all the evil weapons of this time. Was it not to get rid of him once and for all? As long as it hit, no matter how powerful the evil spirit was, its existence would definitely be completely erased from this world. Duque let out the most nervous roar in his heart, Motherf asterisk cur, how Duque hoped that after this sword hit, there would be no more problems with the Scourge army. Dreams were beautiful. Reality was cruel. A huge white bone claw suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was so huge, like a terrifying wall of white bones, firmly blocking between Arthas and Turalian. This block was like a natural moat. Duque's face suddenly lost all color. *CK, what is this? Chapter 906. Looking at the system prompt that labeled the claw as Mother of the Frost Dragons, Syndagosa, Duque felt as disgusted as if he had eaten a fly. *CK me. Didn't I remind Malygos to help move Syndagosa's grave? What has this silly blue dragon king been doing all this time? Did this guy not take what I said seriously at all? Duque was infuriated. He was not afraid of a godlike boss, but he was afraid of a pig-like teammate. He did not do what he was told to do, and instead sent a strong fighter to the enemy. How could he tolerate such a teammate? At this moment, Duque even wanted to kill Malygos. However, the next moment, when Duque stared at the pale and huge bone claw, a cluster of resentful thoughts was analyzed by the system elf. It was a crazy resentment that had almost solidified into a solid form. In a trance, Duque saw this illusion. A long time ago, the chromatic dragons were given the mission of guarding the world of Azeroth. One day, Nesario created the soul of the dragon and used the excuse of fighting against the Burning Legion to deceive the other dragons into injecting their power into this artifact. In the sky above the Well of Eternity, Nesario openly betrayed his former brothers and sisters. Malygos and his beloved consort, Syndagosa, led their blue dragons to surround the Guardian of the Earth in an attempt to annihilate this great traitor of the dragons. They attacked Nesario, but Nesario used the soul of the dragon to kill almost all the blue dragons in an instant. Syndagosa was sent flying all the way to the extreme north. She, who could no longer fly, fell headfirst into the frozen soil of the Ice Crown. She was blind and on the verge of death. She desperately struggled in the direction of the Dragonbone Waste, that was the resting place of the dragons. She gathered all her remaining power and called for Malygos to help her, but the only response she got was the howling of the cold wind. The distance was too far. She desperately and painfully realized that she could no longer reach the Dragonbone Waste to rest in peace. Her sanity slowly faded along with her life. In the madness before her death, there was only hatred left in her heart. Hatred for the Burning Legion, hatred for Nesario, and even hatred for Malygos. But most of all, it was hatred for the entire world of mortals. At the moment of her death, Sindagosa swore, revenge. Lich King Nazul resurrected her and gave her a chance for revenge. She also became one of the leaders of Ice Crown Castle, the mother of all frost dragons. The image ended here. The bone dragons were not liches. What little rationality they had left was not enough to hide their thoughts. This was not important. Their strength made up for everything. Only Duque knew that perhaps it was the changes in fate that made everything messed up. According to the original history, Sindagosa would need at least another 20 years to come out, but he attacked Arthas ahead of time. As a result, the current Lich King Nazul went to resurrect Sindagosa. If that was the case, then Nazul had long since set his eyes on Sindagosa, who wasn't in the Dragonbone Waste. It was just that for some reason he didn't revive her at the start of the third battle at the Dark Portal. Perhaps it was to nurture the dark power of the mother of the frost dragons, or for some other reason. Duque could suddenly understand why Malygos, the Blue Dragon King, did not bring Sindagosa's remains back. When love turned into hate, the more love there was, the more hate there was. The death of his partner was a tragedy. But to find out that his partner's hatred for him had not dissipated even after 10,000 years had passed was unbearable for anyone. Bringing the remains of a dragon with such resentment back to the Dragonbone Wasteland was like inviting a wolf into the house and tearing down his ancestral grave. Alright, understanding is one thing. If you didn't move the grave, Malygos, you bastard, you should have told me or my people. You bastard Blue Dragon, you've screwed me over. Well, understanding was not the same as understanding. Du hated Malygos, who had not buried his wife's body for 10,000 years. Without the mess Malygos had left behind, how could Sindagosa have interfered? Teleportation with enemy interference was extremely dangerous. If it had been a human, they would have been turned to dust long ago. But Sindagosa, who was a blue dragon, was different. His body was unimaginably tough and could withstand even more spatial distortion. That was why Nazul had personally intervened and used Sindagosa's claws to save Arthas. Ha, Duke Marcus. I will be back. I will definitely be back. When I return, it will be the end of all living beings in this world. Arthas, who only had half of his body left, laughed maniacally in the gap between Sindagosa's claws. Duque bared his teeth and ordered, Mograine, Turalian, destroy his evil half. The two holy knights immediately understood. Right in front of the furious Arthas, two holy swords chopped down, completely disintegrating the lower half of Arthas' body. No, with Arthas' angry roar, the frost dragon's bone claws finally disappeared into the huge portal. A smile finally appeared on Duque's lips. The Lich King Nazul had originally wanted Arthas' body. Now that half of the fallen prince's body had been destroyed, would Arthas become the next Lich King in the end? This was really a thought-provoking conjecture. As Arthas retreated in a sorry state, the entire forest finally returned to silence. Mograine and the others gathered around. This battle of ours. Turalian was a little hesitant. Duque let out a long breath. At least it was a success. The body of a Death Knight can indeed be reconstructed, but the new creation is definitely not as good as the original. We can at least be sure that Arthas will not interfere in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. At least no one from the Alliance died, but half of Arthas's strength had been destroyed. Duque turned to Turalian and asked, after using Holy Healing, Dan, Turalian smiled. It's no big deal. He just overdrew his energy. The holy light is not dark energy, so there won't be any side effects. Just give that guy an extra chicken leg for his 3 meals. However, I'm afraid we can't count on Sai Dan's combat power for the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Duque waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. He had brought so many people with him just to be on the safe side. After all, in the original history, the Alliance had only sent Jaina's Theramore Expeditionary Force. Suddenly, in the far north of Fellwood Forest, a huge wave of dark energy shocked everyone. That's... Queen Sylvanas was shocked. It's nothing, Duque patted Queen Sylvanas on the shoulder and smiled. A dreadlord must have died. Chapter 907. How awesome would a legendary hero who had stepped into the realm of heroes be? Just look at an egg. 10,000 years ago, Illidan used the power of a demon to destroy the Burning Legion. What arcane power could not do, the demon's dark energy did. Even when he was captured and locked up for 10,000 years, he never changed his mind. Anyone who was locked up in a sealed space without seeing the sun or moon for a month would go insane, let alone 10,000 years. Fortunately, Illidan was blind 10,000 years ago, or he would have gone even crazier. Even though he was suspicious of Arthas' motives, Illidan was still thirsty for magic. He felt that with the power of Gul'dan's skull, he should be able to defeat the Burning Legion's army in Fellwood Forest. So, he easily took down the demon guards guarding the artifact and got what he wanted. Hiss! Illidan gasped. Then he was immediately amazed by the power contained in the magic artifact. A normal magic artifact would not be able to attract Illidan. But how attractive was this divine artifact-level magic artifact to him? To put it simply, he was willing to be a moth to a flame. But Gul'dan was a demigod, and after he jumped ship from a shaman to a warlock, his strength was undoubtedly top-notch. The key was that he died in the tomb of Sargeras. Gul'dan, who had a powerful soul and unparalleled resentment, was immersed in the dark power that flowed out of the tomb of Sargeras for a long time after his death. This made the quality of the entire magic artifact even higher. Illidan would never forget the scene of him activating the power that Sargeras bestowed upon him during the War of the Ancients, and the powerful power that he could not stop. He could still remember the feeling of the powerful energy flowing through his limbs. This addiction made Illidan choose to absorb the power of Gul'dan's skull without hesitation. Just a small portion, but he was like Popeye eating fresh spinach. The muscles in his limbs all swelled up. If he did not restrain himself, perhaps he would have completely turned into a demon. Even so, after Illidan absorbed the power of Gul'dan's skull, he immediately turned into a demigod. Illidan's enlarged nostrils spewed out turbid dark power. He enjoyed this feeling very much. Unlike those pitiful wretches who were overwhelmed by the violent power, Illidan was very clear-headed. He knew what he wanted and what he had to do. Now, it's time to complete Tyron's quest. With power, nothing was a problem. With the magical profession of demon hunter, Illidan's body was like a black gust of wind, shuttling between the tall trees of Fellwood Forest. The stench of a demon floating in the forest was the best guide. It was no different from having a radar. It was just that Illidan was extremely sensitive to demons. The pollution isn't enough. The Great Master is about to obtain the treasure from the Endless Sea. He will come soon, so we must clear the path first. Ha! A greenish-black shadow suddenly shot out from the jungle like a bolt of lightning. Like a crescent moon, dozens of demon heads with long curved horns soared into the sky. Even the leader of the Dreadlords, Tichondrius, couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. A powerful enemy. Who is it? Accompanied by a curse, the Dreadlord raised his hand and cast Putrid Hornet Swarm. A large number of creatures and insects that lived in the darkness responded to the Dreadlord's summon. This black wave of foul aura immediately turned the entire area into a kingdom of death. If Illidan was still in the cone-shaped area that was being attacked, he would have turned into a pile of scarlet bones. He was too fast. The speed of an agile hero was definitely beyond the imagination of mortals. It looked like he had been hit, but in reality, Tichondrius had missed by at least 90 degrees. Without giving the Dreadlord any time to react, his winged back suddenly had two horrifying bone-deep wounds. One could even see that his shoulder blades, which were many times harder than steel, had also been cut deep by the sword. Tichondrius was scared out of his wits. What made him even more worried was yet to come. The dark energy circuit in his body was suddenly disrupted by a very terrifying force. A force that was even more intense than fire rushed into his dark energy circuit. Not only did it evaporate at least 1/5 of his dark energy, but it also caused a chaotic shockwave that caused damage to his internal organs. While he was not paying attention, 4 consecutive slashes landed on his left rib. This caused the Dreadlord to let out the loudest cry of pain since the start of the battle. Just as he half knelt down, 2 more slashes landed on his right leg. Illidan turned into a tornado as he circled around Tichondrius and slashed at him at high speed. In front of Illidan, Tichondrius's movements were slower than a snail's, and each of the Dreadlord's close combat attacks was easily dodged. I can't go on like this. Tichondrius suddenly blasted, putrid hornet swarm, at the ground. Illidan frowned and could only retreat quickly. In his opinion, he had a safe enough distance from the Dreadlord. But the Dreadlord's tricks were far beyond his imagination. He suddenly felt very sleepy. In less than half a second, Illidan fell asleep. Holding twin blades of Azimuth, he fell asleep standing on the battlefield. The Dreadlord finally let out a sinister laugh. Absolute slumber. It was a terrifying skill that could make intelligent creatures sleep until they died if they failed to resist it. The only drawback was that external damage could awaken the victim. It didn't matter. Tichondrius grabbed Illidan tightly with both claws. He wanted to tear this night elf, who had given him painful memories and didn't know what he was talking about, into 2. Then he would pull out his lowly soul and torture it for thousands of years. Just as he suddenly used his magic, Illidan woke up. Idiot! It's too late. The Dreadlord sneered. Is that so? Illidan replied with the same sinister smile. In the hands of the Dreadlord, Illidan was originally like a toy. But in less than 1/100th of a second, Illidan's body grew bigger, becoming taller and stronger than Tichondrius, demon. Impossible! The Dreadlord leader's screams came to an abrupt halt, because his heart had been clawed out by the terrifying black demon. No, it wasn't just his heart. Even his soul was pulled out by the black demon. Chapter 908. If it was a normal kill, the demon's soul could easily return to the twisting nether. As long as it was someone powerful, resurrection would not be a problem. But if it was a fight between demons, that would be bad. Especially when the opponent had the power from Sargeras's origin. No, no, no. Don't kill me. Above the heart that reeked of black blood, Tichondrius's soul that was the size of a small doll begged. However, Illidan, who had turned into a black demon, had a cruel smile that was even more demonic than the Dreadlord. Compared to letting you go, I'm more eager to see your eternal death. Illidan squeezed the Dreadlord leader's heart as he cackled like an owl. Then, in an instant, he only used his left hand to punch the Dreadlord's body that was beginning to kneel. The impact was filled with the power of darkness, and it easily blasted this body that made countless living beings tremble in fear into pieces. The next moment, a black light shot into the sky. The souls that had been killed and imprisoned by Tichondrius began to escape from their soul cages and spread in all directions. Illidan did not care about this at all. Even though he had turned back into a night elf, he still enjoyed it. He enjoyed the supreme pleasure of the powerful power flowing through every inch of his blood vessels. He laughed heartily as he held the broken heart up high, allowing the Dreadlord's heart's blood to pour over his head, face, and mouth. He wanted to savor the sweetness of this victory. He wanted to savor this crazy killing until, Illidan? The sudden exclamation made Illidan's body stiffen. He couldn't believe his ears. He was too crazy. He had forgotten himself. Even Tyrant and Malfurion, as well as the sentries and druids they brought with them, did not know when they arrived at this ruined battlefield. At least 4 digits of his fellow night elves had witnessed his transformation from a demon back to a night elf. That's right. Illidan could ignore the gazes of his fellow night elves because from the day they convicted him and sent him to the Black Prison 10,000 years ago, they were no longer his fellow night elves in his heart. However, he could not ignore the look in Tyrann's eyes, which went from concern to disappointment, and then sadness. Illidan said the word, 3 times in a row. He really wanted to say, I didn't do anything wrong, I did it for you, Tyrant. But in the end he chose to remain silent. At a time like this, all excuses would only be feeble and useless nonsense. The pride in his heart did not allow him to lower his head to anyone, not even Tyrant Whisperwind, whom he had always loved. He held his head high and looked Tyrant in the eye. He was telling her with his eyes, yes, this is my Dao. I'm not wrong. Illidan gave the choice to Tyrant. Tyrant's slender body trembled uncontrollably. She was the one who had insisted on Illidan's release. In order to save Illidan, she even killed Maiev Shadowsong's subordinates, creating a huge rift between her and the night elf hero. But how did Illidan repay her for saving him? Abandoning oneself to depravity. Once again he used the power of the devil. Stronger and crazier than before. Even if his original intention was to help her, and he even killed a powerful dreadlord for it. Unfortunately, the law was merciless. If she allowed him to continue to stay in the race, it would lead to the collapse of the ruling order of the Night Elves. Gritting her teeth and holding back her tears, Tyrant suddenly raised her head and her clear voice echoed throughout the entire Fellwood forest. Illidan's storm rage. Even though you obeyed my orders, High Priestess Tyrant Whisperwind of the Moon God's Temple, to eliminate the demons in the Fellwood Forest and kill a dreadlord, you have betrayed my trust in you. You have violated the natural teachings of the Night Elves by recklessly using the evil power of the devil. Tyrant took a step forward. 8,000 years ago, we finally decided to exile the High Elves who also abused their magic and refused to obey the orders of Elune and Cenarius. So, even though you have the heart to serve the world, we cannot accept your actions and ways. Tyrant took another step forward. As the High Priestess, I hereby sentence you, Illidan Stormrage, to be exiled. Once you become enemies with the Night Elves on the battlefield, we will give you a merciless blow. Do you accept this sentence? It was impossible to describe Illidan's feelings at that moment. Had there been hope? Despair again? Following his heart? Unwillingness to be bound? Perhaps there was everything. However, Illidan knew that the beautiful days of his childhood and youth were gone forever. And in this lifetime, he was destined to never receive Tyrant's love. But he did not regret it. He only had one word for Tyrant's reply. Was it disdain? Was it contempt? Retaliation? Or something else? No one knew. The last thing the thousands of elite elves saw was the back of a lone wolf. No one knew that it would be the birth of a new legend, or the beginning of a terrifying legend. Seeing the former Night Elf powerhouse, the High Priestess' childhood friend, leave the Night Elves in such a way, every elf's heart was filled with strange feelings. Illidan left. Leading the army, Tyrant walked on the forest road, which was the path to Mount Hyjal. Malfurion, Before she could finish, Malfurion interrupted, You're not wrong. Your intentions were good, and you gave him a chance, but he didn't cherish it. Tyrant was silent. Malfurion continued, There's no time to be sad. According to the prophet's prophecy, the Burning Legion's main force will arrive in 3 days at most. The Night Elves can only look forward now. Yes, I heard that you met that Duque. That was 15 years ago. The previous guardian, Aegwin, asked me to go over and help. He called me through Alexstrasza, and I couldn't refuse. Alexstrasza, Isra, and Nozdormu, the 3 dragon aspects, could be considered as the Night Elves' guardian deities. One gave them the World Tree. One allowed them to soar in the Emerald Dream. And one that granted them eternal life. As long as it did not go against Elune's will, the Night Elves would rarely refuse their call. No, Tyrant, what I'm concerned about is that Alliance commander, Duke Marcus. What kind of person is he? A human genius, a person who will create miracles. Tyrant gave a high evaluation without hesitation. Chapter 909. Archimonde did not reach Mount Hyjal so quickly at first. Duque was glad that this bought time for the cooperation between the Alliance tribe and the Shadow Elves. Soon, Duque could not laugh anymore. Archimonde had dragged it out for too long. Whether it was the Naga in the sea or the chaos caused by the shattering of the Well of Eternity, it was impossible for them to pose too much of an obstacle to him. The only explanation was that there was something in the middle of the endless sea that attracted Archimonde. Especially when Vashj actually ran out and attacked Tiras, it made Duque frown even more. So, with the alliance of the Alliance tribe and the Night Elves, the Burning Legion was not far behind. With each of them feeling uneasy, the three factions decided to hold a formal meeting in Ashenvale's Astrana. Astrana was a fortress mostly surrounded by a lake, and it looked more like a huge group of villas in the middle of a lake. The natural and gentle style of the Night Elves was on full display in the entire fortress. What was even more rare was the location of the fortress. It was located west of the entrance to the Fellwood Forest. Normally speaking, if the Burning Legion's army went to Mount Hyjal, they did not need to pass through Astrana Fortress. This made the fortress that guarded the direction to the Black Sea coast even more delicate in terms of geographical location. Although it could not become an obstacle to the Burning Legion's advance, on the other hand, it could attack the Burning Legion's flank from the fortress. Almost as soon as they saw this geographical location, the big shots of the various factions had an association. Today, Duque, Jaina, and Sylvanas represented the alliance at the meeting. On the tribe's side were Thrall, Wajin, and the Tauren chief Cain Bloodhoof. The Night Elves were naturally Tyrande and Malfurion. The Prophet Medivh, as the leader of the alliance of the three major factions, was the first to speak. I welcome everyone who is willing to put aside their prejudices and cross the boundaries of race, organization, and country to gather together. Medivh spoke in the human common language. With the support of a mysterious ancient magic called language mastery, the people of the various races could not understand the common language itself, but they magically understood the meaning of every word of Medivh. With the support of this ancient spell, everyone in the hall could easily understand each other's words. Let me emphasize that the world of Azeroth, the world tree at the top of Mount Hyjal, is a sacred tree that grows under the powerful magic spring of the Well of Eternity. It provides the endless energy for the entire world of Azeroth. If the Burning Legion were to seize the power of the world tree, it would be equivalent to obtaining the magic spring of the Well of Eternity. In other words, all life in the world would be polluted and destroyed. Before we defeat the Burning Legion's invasion this time, no matter what kind of conflicts or blood feuds there are between the various races, I hope that we can temporarily put them aside. At a time like this, the interests of all of us are the same. At this point, the Medivh bowed in three different directions. In the remaining time, I hope that everyone can quickly come up with a mutually acceptable result. The leaders of the three parties gave friendly smiles to the Medivh. However, the atmosphere was harmonious. At the beginning of the meeting, after the Night Elves briefly introduced the military strength and defensive situation on Mount Hyjal, the three parties had a heated debate on how to join forces and defeat the Burning Legion's attack. Sal was the first to speak. Since the Night Elves' strongest defensive magic formation is set up on Mount Hyjal, then we can directly set up our defense along the mountain path. In theory, this was right, but it was a pity that it stepped on the Night Elves' sore spot. Tyrande objected on the spot. Grey Valley and Fellwood Forest have been the territory of the Night Elves since 10,000 years ago. We can't sit back and watch our territory be trampled on. Moreover, we need more time to strengthen the defensive line on Mount Hyjal, and the space on the mountain that can be used for defense is limited. The Night Elves hope that the Alliance and the Horde can send extra troops to resist the Burning Legion on the way to Mount Hyjal. Wajin stood up. Does this make sense? There is a limit to the total number of troops that Archimonde can bring into Azeroth. Once the Legion suffers losses, he can almost infinitely summon new demons from the twisting nether to replace them. Tyrant emphasized, within the range of Mount Hyjal, there is a large magic formation for teleportation and summoning of demons. According to our ancient documents and records from the dragons, Archimonde is quite arrogant and confident. As long as we don't cause heavy losses to the Burning Legion, we won't provoke Archimonde to send more troops. Wajin glanced at Duque, then waved his fist. You are betting the lives of the Horde or Alliance soldiers on a result that is likely to become meaningless. Our tribe cannot accept this. Sal held Wajin down. Since the Beastmen have crossed time and space to come to Azeroth, even if we are just a foreign race, we can't change the fact that we are already living in this world. Of course, our tribe is willing to contribute to this world. But the tribe has just experienced a great change, and we have less than 200,000 people left, so we can only send 40,000 elites. So, whether to push the 40,000 Horde to the front line for meaningless consumption, or to build a stronger line of defense at Mount Hyjal, I leave this decision to you, Lady Tyrande Whisperwind. Tyrande was in a dilemma. During this period of time, the Night Elves had almost figured out the Horde's resources. Even with the addition of the Tauren and Trolls, the entire tribe only had less than 200,000 people, including the old, weak, women, and children. In theory, it was definitely good enough for the tribe to send out 40,000 soldiers. Of course, if the female beastmen and orc laborers who could also fight were counted, it was not impossible for the tribe to send out 120,000 soldiers. But then, it would really be a battle of life and death. Regardless of whether they won or not, the tribe would definitely be wiped out. Tyrande couldn't help but look at the more powerful alliance. Duque smiled. Just now, Sel had played a little trick. The tribe had a small population, few soldiers, and even fewer elite soldiers. In theory, of course, this was the fault of the alliance. If it weren't for Duque being blown up into the void for 10 years, the tribe wouldn't even have 100,000 people left. Duque said, yes. That's right. In terms of military power, our alliance is stronger, so the alliance is willing to take on more responsibilities. In fact, at this time, the alliance has already landed in Azeroth and turned the whole of Azeroth into a stronghold. But as the commander of the alliance, I don't think the Burning Legion will go through Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest, and then to the foot of Mount Hyjal. Tyrande frowned. You mean, Duque spat out 2 words. Over the mountain. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.